Our protagonist was sent to another world, but instead of becoming a regular player, he became the game master of that place, the famous GM. His mission was to rebuild everything that had been devastated by a nuclear war. The problem is that this war caused radiation to transform animals into deadly creatures. Outside the base was a wilderness where even a crow could be lethal, and of course, the few survivors on this planet were far from friendly. To accomplish the task, he needed to call some players from Earth to come to his world. These guys thought they were entering a very realistic virtual reality world when in reality, they were going to another world. The problem for our guy is that even though he's the game master, he's not omnipotent. He had to rebuild the world from scratch, and that means starting small, from the first base where the players appear, from electricity to bathrooms, everything really needed to be rebuilt. The catch is that he can only accept a limited number of players, and that's why he starts calling people with specific skills. As GM, he decides what missions the guys have to do to gain experience. But of course, a sick player always messes things up, and this is the story of how an ordinary boy rebuilt an empire from scratch using his GM system. A girl called a young man in bed and comes closer, telling him to stop pretending to be asleep. The boy is there, all happy, while she called him for fun, but in reality, he seems to be lying in a desert with a creature with its tongue in his face. He opens his eyes, all happy, and then his expression changes. He gets a scare. A two-headed hyena was coming for him to bite him. He grabs a stone from the side, throws it in its face, and runs away while saying his name is Chu Guang, a survivor of this place isolated in the middle of this wilderness. He was looking for supplies and food. Little did he know that he would be exhausted to the point of falling asleep alone and finding these beasts. He seems to be able to escape, thinking he was lucky to find a monster that isn't that strong. He looks back and sees the city completely destroyed and remembers that walking in a place like this at night is extremely dangerous, so even if he goes hungry today, he had to go back to base. In front of an abandoned hospital at entrance 404 was where he called his base. The door had the same number, and he says not to be fooled by the dilapidated exterior because inside it was pretty amazing. Man, the boy has a NASA base in there. Right away, a little creature with wheels approaches and welcomes him, saying that the Grand Master has returned again. This was the assistant Sev, code 777. Guang tells the critter to calm down, that he only went out for half a day, but Sev continues to say that he has several missions to complete. The robot is the base's assistant, and he is the GM, the famous game master. Having a place like this for refuge guarantees a peaceful life for him in this isolated world. Not to mention that he has food so he doesn't starve, even though it's obviously not the best. But being the master of this game didn't come without its obligations. He had to coordinate a group of creatures known as players who come from Blue Earth using the internet, making them come to the desolate land and build their lives there. A very suitable mission for him who also came from Earth 5 months ago. The story then asks us if you would believe that there is a game as real as the world itself. In the dog's WhatsApp group, the guys are commenting on it. Some seem to believe it, and others say they doubt it very much, but if it existed, they would pay dearly for a male dorm. A blonde guy says that Guang is really disillusioned. If such incredible technology existed, it would be used by the military first. He then spams the group telling Gang to stop dreaming or stop lying, but is surprised when Gang says that it does exist and asks if he is willing to try, sending the link to the desolate world. Already at base 404, Gang sends the link by voice command and says that he just has to click if he is interested. As you can see, Gang's job is to deceive people and make them click on the link and go to another world to be trapped, and he is confident that with the number of people he has brought, it was already enough to complete the mission he has. For bringing a few more people, he gets a nano-carbon vest and 5 more points. But the truth is that 5 months ago he worked in a sales office. On the day he had a great sale and managed to make a lot of profit. Everyone had a celebration banquet, but that night he felt a strange tightness in his chest. A sharp sound passed by his ear, and in the next second he was losing consciousness. As soon as he opened his eyes, it was when he saw himself in this strange, desolate world. At first, he thought he had been thrown into some kind of reality show or something like that, and with that he started running like crazy in search of the end, but strangely, that place was much bigger than he imagined. The strangest thing was that he became a completely different person from head to toe. Soon after, He heard again that same sharp sound that brought him there. That's when the most improbable, but for us, very probable, happened. The system window appeared right in front of him, welcoming the new collector Chu Guang. He immediately wanted to grab his cell phone to call the police, but obviously he didn't have it anymore. After a day walking in that place, he started to get hungry, and to survive, he had no choice but to accept the reality that he had ended up in another world unexpectedly. After following for a while, he found a place with some people. He approached and saw some people with their backs turned and imagined that maybe he would find food there. Little by little, he was going to enter the place secretly, but suddenly someone pointed a reincarcerated person, that it was good not to move or things would get complicated. Gong soon noticed that the guy was speaking a language he had never heard, but at the same time he could understand everything. Old Walter told him not to take a step because otherwise things would get complicated. Gong, a little crooked, asked him to calm down and said that he was only there to look for direction, but the shot was fired, but only to kill a creature that was right in front of the two. Walter then came out saying to the boy that he shouldn't be walking in a place like this unarmed. He even warned the monster that he would end up becoming food for these creatures. Gong, a little embarrassed, thanked him, and to this day what the guy said is true. In this world, you need information, resources, and that's what he did for the next 5 months. This was a kind of parallel world that was decimated by a war between humanity itself. The whole world was swept away, and the toxicity of the air created mutated animals. Obviously, they were not the only danger, as there were countless assassins and bandits there. After a while there, Guang learned a lot, but he still kept hearing that same sharp sound in his ear until one day he started walking through the city and approached the abandoned sanatorium. The more he went in that direction, the stronger the sound became. He then went into the place until in the back he saw a strange door. He followed the corridor, realizing that the sound was getting louder and louder until he found the door to base 404 and was sure that the sound was coming from behind it. Somehow he felt as if it was calling him, and without even thinking, his hand went alone to the button. At the same instant, the door opened, smoke came out, and he was covered by a shadow. Obviously, it was just Sev who already approached, welcomed him, and said that now he was the GM of this place. Before Guang understood anything, his profession had already been changed, and he became a level 0 game master. Sevon said that he was there to support him in the work he would have to do. Through the internet, he would have to attract creatures known as players to this world and help them build bases and houses there. In this way, the world would again be inhabited by more people, and he would gain more points and become stronger. Gong was excited that at least it seemed he could get in touch with Earth from there. The robot explained that yes, even because they had an official page that came into direct contact with Earth. The players who are appointed to the place will receive the number and will be registered in his profile. He could also give specific lower numbers to people who want to participate in the beta. The game will then be delivered to the person's headset in a special way. A girl is submerged when suddenly she wakes up inside a liquid, and the robot explains that when this happens, she becomes a clone of this place. Guang smiles and says that apparently he received a second life from the heavens, but then the guy says that he will call the little robot just Sev. Apparently he had not been named at that time. He was all happy spinning around our guy who was wondering why he was acting like a child. Even though the assistant was a bit childish, at least the system seemed pretty overpowered, since he was the game master. The first mission he received was to have 4 people register in the game. Back in that same dorm, the blonde comments about there not being a game so realistic and that fight from before is going on. He thinks it's ridiculous that the guys are talking about something 100% immersive, because that's impossible. Meanwhile, Kong is doing everything to convince the guy to try. That's when he sent the link and told the guy to test it. The blonde was confused and was already thinking about putting the mods he created in another game. It seems he has a mod where you have 100 women. He's already happy as hell. While they say it's going to be amazing, he then says he's crazy to test this thing. As a student in the technology area who wants to see the future of humanity, with that, he clicked the button. Suddenly the blue thing appeared around him. A helmet formed out of nowhere, surrounding the boy's head and throwing him to the ground. Man, apparently things are more forced than I imagined, but instead of being scared, the crazy guy is happy as hell, saying he's anxious for the realistic immersion. While the blonde guy named Wei arrived in the game, our guy introduced himself and said that he was there to restore civilization. But Wei was much more anxious to venture into other parts of the game until he came across a warning that there were still 72 hours before the game started. The crazy guy hits his head saying that he had already taken off his pants and now he will have to stay 3 days like that. The friends of the building are already saying they will enter his room to beat up the poor guy. Meanwhile, Guang is seeing a chat that is only for the beta players of the server. Everyone is commenting about the weird headset they received out of nowhere and trying to understand how that came about. Gang just pretended that they were a mega company and this was a secret technology. Only 4 people had received this unique headset, so it was good that they didn't lose the helmet. It would serve to create the information and identify the user, in addition to registering the account and creating the clone. The guys then say that this was too good to be free and ask if they have to pay. As soon as our boy reveals that it will be free for now, they are all happy dancing and confessing. Gang is happy to have called the guys he used to play with while saying to himself that he has no idea what happened to his relatives since he disappeared. Everyone must have deleted his contact and forgotten about him. He then tells Seb that he wanted to make some changes to the game's home screen. He knows that to build a city from the beginning, men will be more important for their physical strength and that's why they need a cape that baits the poor guys, maybe even an artificial intelligence with the ability to talk to pretend to be a girl and ask for help in the little game, already imagining that if it were Avi, for example, he would fall in love saying that he will log in now to help the beautiful girl. Sev then said that all this is easy to do, but he was wanting to know why our boy only accepted 4 players out of the 11. At this moment they have more than 100 initial capsules, so he could have many more people. Guang says that resources are still very scarce to attempt a large population. He even has 3 commands to kick out people who start to go against his plans, but he needs people who want to play. A lot of depressed rebels would only cause error, so for now he will focus on these 4 people. Sev then says that it makes sense since with these 4 he completes the first mission. He clicks on the item and the nano protection vest appears on his body. The vest can absorb the kinetic energy of the damage caused to him and distribute it in durability. Singen says that he can also get interesting things in the mystery boxes of 1, 10 and 100 points. The 1 gave food, the 10 gave medicine and the 100 usually came with a weapon. He received 5 points from the first mission and doesn't know if he spends it on food or saves it to trade for a weapon. Then Sev tells him to take a look at the new mission before deciding. The mission talked about the players arriving, but he would have to prepare a generator with the potential to create at least 10 kilowatts. In addition to that, he would receive the substance extractor and Save warns that this is very important. Seeing that he will already receive the 100 points, he tells Sev to open 5 boxes to have food at least. With that, a door opens and smoke starts to open desolate. He asks if that's all the mystery boxes deliver. The poor guy needing to eat in the apocalypse received a lot of lollipops and candy. While he was complaining, he noticed that there was a paper in the middle of all that and took it to read. The message said that the creatures in this world were easier to take advantage of than the players, something about the creatures being curious and extremely useful. At the end of the message it said that this had been left by the first Grand Master of this base. But, okay, here's the translation of the provided text, adjusted for a US English audience and context, suitable for a YouTube video. Gong gets furious because instead of another treat, he receives this useless message that doesn't help at all. But at the same time, he can't help but think that the person who left the message also created the helmet and this whole game, which was actually a brilliant idea. So, he asks Sev if he knows who the first Grand Master was. Sev replies that the system was only activated when our boy stepped inside. Our guy says he understands, but there must be some records in the database. The attack by both factions was successful, leading to the extinction of all humanity. The robot says that after that, an intense winter began, but it seems the guy's information was deleted. He decides to save the message and focus on his mission. He tells the robot he's leaving and will be back in 3 days at most to help the players when they arrive. He decides to first take a trip to the survivor camp. It's 8 a.m. when he sees the 2-headed hyenas in the street and knows this will be a huge challenge for the new players. The problem is, they immediately turn and seem to have noticed him. Apparently, these creatures ended up like this, with this stuff on their faces because of mutations due to exposure to gamma rays. He smiles and goes to grab a steel bar from the ground, knowing that with this and his vest, maybe he can handle them. Luckily, they haven't noticed him. They turn and continue on their way, which is good because he wants to avoid being discovered for now, since he knows the real threats are the mutants in this place. The creeper, for example, is a biological weapon that crawls and was made to kill. The hyenas are pretty smart, too, and always send some out in front to find targets, just like the mutated cockroaches in this place. When one finds you, you're quickly surrounded and being pulled down. Man, I don't want to die to a giant cockroach. That's terrifying. A while later, he's on Burt Street where the survivor camp is. First, he wants to buy some chips and then stock up on some supplies, or it's going to be difficult when this place is full of players. Chips are basically the currency used here. He puts some items on the scale to trade for coins, but, of course, the scale always says there's less than what's actually there. The old man hands over 3 tokens. I thought they were chips. But no. And makes up an excuse for our guy, saying his items are so-so. Gong asks for some weapons, but the old man says he's sure he can't afford them. Plus, he recommends the kid buy gasoline since winter is coming. Gong didn't know this, and the old man says it's because he's only been here for 5 months. Winter might even arrive earlier, starting to snow in October. Because of this, the creatures start hunting more and more to stock up on food. The problem is, when walking in the winter, you never know what's hiding under the snow. Also, the trade caravans won't be running anymore. The only option will be to go from Burt Street to Stone Tower, a 6-mile journey. Gong had discovered a while ago that old Charlie was a survivor who was captured and enslaved. He was then sold at auction and bought by the owner of Burt Street. Since then, he's been taking care of the trades and negotiations with the other survivors. But he was a smart guy who, in his old world, would have become an engineer or a doctor. Our guy then thanks him for the tips and says he's leaving. He walks through the city and arrives at his house, knowing that 3 tokens isn't nearly enough for what he needs. He opens a box where he's been accumulating them, and in total he has 50. First, he needs to buy some materials that will help him repair the place. He'll use the players to look for resources and strengthen the walls of the sanatorium. It's a 100% hardcore game where, if you die, you can never enter again, so hunting early on is crazy. Obviously, besides tools, he'll also need food. As soon as the players are activated, they're exactly like humans in this world and need food to recover energy. He imagines that if they get hungry, they'll start wanting to resolve things in an uncontrolled way. At a minimum, he'd have to prepare enough food to sustain 5 adults for a week. Even though it seems like little, that's already 70 pieces, since normally a meal costs 1 coin. But that's if they eat pancakes. If, for example, he feeds them green wheat, then it'll all work out. He closes the door to his house, thinking it's time to go back to the center, when suddenly he's face to face with someone. The girl apologizes and apparently he's already met her. Her name is Xu Yao, the youngest daughter of the Yu family. A little embarrassed, she says she heard the noise coming from his house and thought someone was going to rob him. He thanks her and she smiles. Then she says that whenever he's away, she keeps an eye out to make sure no one's entering. Since she has a lot of free time, it's no problem. But Gong says she's being too nice to him, a stranger, so she should be more careful. But Xu Yao retorts, saying that first, she's not a child, and second, he gave her soup when she was hungry, so she's sure he's not that bad. He hands her a candy, telling her to take it as thanks. She thanks him, saying she's never even eaten candy. She offers it to our guy, who laughs and pats her on the head, saying he's leaving, while she shouts, telling him not to worry, she'll keep an eye on his house. Back in 404, he says it's been 3 days and the players are about to log in. The guy Yui hasn't even entered the game yet. He smiles at this. A strong light shines, and the player's perception starts to sharpen. He opens his eyes, the water tank starts to empty, and he comes out with 4 other players next to him. The player with white hair is called Passing Shadow or something like that, and he's based on strength. The other one, called Oroboa, who's looking at his own pants, had created a healthy waifu but didn't become a man. Anyway, his character is based on agility. The last one, the hairy one, is called Galestorm, and his character is based on intelligence. They all commented on how real the game is, and Wei agrees with them. The door starts to open, and they wonder if it's Gong. As soon as the door opens, Gong says that a war has arrived and left the world unrecognizable. And that's precisely why they, the players, were called to rebuild human civilization. He's the administrator of this place, named Down. The assistant introduces himself as Save and says he's eager to learn from them. The players are all staring in disbelief. Meanwhile, the system congratulates our guy for bringing 4 people and leaving them in shock. Gong is confident that he's already shown he's the best here. The 4 are asking if he's really an artificial intelligence and say he's no different from a real person. It's crazy, but they want to know where Senor Gong is. The protagonist tells them to stop asking questions and says that anyone who wants to leave the game just has to go back to the cabin. He tells them to follow him while he reads the survivor's guide. While walking through the forest, Gong says that the first rule they all have to obey, and this is absolute, is this: whoever disobeys it will be punished with forced hibernation. Oraboa says that this administrator is almost like a game master with the power to ban them from the world. Gale Storm and Passing Shadow say that, for now, because of all the work Gong did to bring them here, it's better for them to keep quiet. The protagonist looks back and says that it's been 200 years since the wars. The fact that they're even standing here is very lucky. He needs them to quickly understand the situation they're in to start rebuilding their Earth. The forest they're in is north of the city, far from all the radiation. The first mission is to pick up that hatchet from the ground and start collecting wood. Not only do they need something to keep warm in the winter, but they also need to rebuild the sanatorium. The guys think it's all a game and are happy, saying it's going to be incredible to rebuild their homeland. But Gong warns them not to go too far, that there are various mutants out there. As soon as the guys go to collect, our guy tells Save to keep an eye out and warn them of any danger. A little while later, the hatchet blows start and the trees fall to the ground. Gale Storm comments that Passing Shadow is using the hatchet with great ease. Oraboa says it's nothing special, but imagines how good it would be if he were 10 times stronger. Gale Storm tells them that it probably has to do with the difference in character attributes that must be based on reality, since the capsule created a clone of each of them. He's excited about how realistic and strategic this game seems. Then, Gong tells them to get back to work and walk in that direction, while asking his friends if they think they'll find some elves in the forest. Passing Shadow, more realistically, says that this is an apocalyptic scenario after a nuclear explosion, so there's probably just going to be a bunch of mutants. The other 2 tell Wei to stop screwing around, because the administrator made it clear that they shouldn't leave. They chop at the tree and Wei is getting annoyed, wondering why he's going to listen to an NPC, when suddenly he feels something strange and drops the hatchet. His body was trembling, and he wonders why he has the feeling that something terrible is about to happen. Something then passes, hitting beside him. He falls to the ground, and looking up, sees a bunch of feathers and a bird passing. But when he turns, he sees that it was a gigantic mutant. He realizes he won't be able to dodge, while Save is running to the base, warning that something terrible has happened. At that moment, Gong was receiving the rewards for recruiting the 4 people. One of the rewards was the substance extractor. It seems it was something that allowed him to synthesize new players, and for it to work, he needed to extract the natural materials from creatures and bodies. The item he unlocked appeared as a giant tube in the middle of the base. He was interested since the manual said that even mutants could be used. He was eager to start collecting materials and testing this when Save appeared, saying that they were having a problem. A giant bird was attacking the players in the northern part of the sanatorium. Gong then switches back to the bird in the middle of the forest. The guys manage to rescue Wei, but they're still being swooped. However, since for them it's just a game, they're calm. They tell Wei that he's been dodging very well. Gale Storm says that he's sure that this creature must be one of those mutants from the site. Confused, Wei asks what site he's talking about. As far as he remembers, there was only registration. Gong Storm comments on all the creatures that were in the mutant gallery. Wei then tells them to concentrate on how they're going to deal with the gigantic crow. Passing Shadow tells him to calm down and not be afraid. If the creature doesn't attack them, they won't leave. Gale is standing there, asking what they're going to do, until he looks to the side and sees that his friends have all run to the bushes. Then something passes the bird, barely missing it. Everyone asks who threw the stone, but obviously it wasn't any of them. The crow gets hit and whoever attacked was Gong. He throws another one and the bird reflects. Now the bird is going in his direction. With that, he pulls out the metal pipe and says it's a crossbow. In the end, it's always a crossbow. Even if it had 2 heads, the intelligence wouldn't be equal to that of a human. Man, I thought it was going to dodge in the end, but the kid threw a Spartan spear right in the middle of it. The guys are in the bushes, scared, saying that this NPC is too strong. Everyone comments that the administrator was really formidable. A little while later, the mutant bird meat was being roasted. The good thing about these giant mutants is that if you kill one, you have food forever. The guy seems scared to eat it because it's mutant, but Gong says there's no problem. He then explains that scientifically this animal was nothing more than an eagle. The guys are scared of the size, but he explains that gamma rays changed a lot in this world. Also, they needed to concentrate because a beast like this was the least of their problems. He lets out a sigh, thinking that the saddest part is that there isn't any salt to make this tasty. Unfortunately, it's a luxury item. He then tells the guys that they're lucky, since it's very uncommon to have good food in this place. Wei comments that they won't be able to eat all of this at once, and GameStorm says that they can just put it in the refrigerator. However, Hang says that even the prefect, who is the master of the castle in this place, only has 1 refrigerator. The guys are thinking about this business of prefect and castle, and Wei is obviously imagining himself arriving at a castle with several girls pampering him. Git asks how much wood exactly they need, to which Gong responds that they need as much as they can get. Our guy started to realize that these beginners are very different from him, since they can leave at any moment and don't have any sense of urgency. To keep these guys working in the game, he'll need a reward system. He then tells the guys that they'll work with contribution points. The bigger the tree, the more points they earn. And it was good to know that the rewards were very limited. For example, the leg of the bird he killed would cost 5 contribution points. At that moment, everyone was saying they lost a bit of hunger. Our guy then tells them to get back to work, and everyone runs in the direction of the trees. A little while later, they're back, all exhausted. Our guy congratulates everyone and says that in total, they earned more than 2 points of contribution. Okay, here's the English translation of the provided text, adjusted for clarity and flow for a YouTube video script. Okay, so Shadow really pulled his weight, grabbing over 800 resources and snagging the best chicken. Good Time wasn't far behind, getting 450. Poor Gil Storm, bless his heart, all brains and no brawn, he's going hungry. Guang's impressed, the guys are doing way better than he expected. And that eagle showing up was clutch, because convincing them to cut down so much in exchange for just some lollipops would have been tough. So, he explains to the guys that on top of the rewards they get at the base, they can also buy resurrection on the website. But they gotta be careful, it takes 3 days to come back. Shadow thinks that's a crummy option, but his friends tell him to chill, the game just launched. At first, Guang thought about giving them some tokens, but there's a reason he didn't. He came in as the game master, learned the language instantly, but these guys won't be able to communicate with anyone in this world. Good Time chimes in, saying that, aside from the game functions, the base doesn't seem to have any usable energy. Guang agrees, saying they just don't have a generator to power everything. The energy they do have only works for the game system. He then announces he'll give a prize to whoever figures out how to solve that problem. Gil Storm sees his chance to shine. Wake, being the more practical one, suggests just digging a tunnel and stealing power from the system. But Guang explains that even that energy is limited, so they need a way to generate their own. It's already 5 p.m. Time to head back to base, since it gets super dangerous out there after dark. The friends head back, saying time really flies in this game because it's so realistic. Back inside, Guang knows he's going to have to start recruiting people who are unemployed or work odd hours. Otherwise, he'll be all alone at the base every night when the monsters attack. He won't survive. The robot then asks if he wants to take a look at the analysis they did on the clones. He asks what that is, and the AI explains that every time a player enters the capsule, they undergo an analysis. Basically, they can see the development of their genes. For example, Knight has a strength gene, and every time he logs out and back in, they can see how much that gene is developing. It's possible to reach 100%, which would give him a perfect body with maximum human strength, but that's super rare. Right now, he's at 0.3. The rest of the friends, who barely used their abilities, are at 0.1. And we see that Wei has a perception ability. Obviously, the more things they experience, the more they evolve. Wei's slyness doesn't count towards that, though. Guang sums it up. Basically, this bunch of noobs can evolve and become talented. So, back at H University, in the dorm, our friend Gilstorm is waking up in bed. His name is Yifeng. He seems determined to study how to create a generator so he can make one in the game. At lunchtime, he's in the cafeteria, and a guy runs past, excitedly saying that Professor Wang is amazing and he can't believe he's 30. Wang greets the students, telling them to eat quickly or they'll be hungry. This professor's got something special, because these students are all head over heels for him. Something's up. Meanwhile, the professor sees that Yan Feng is sitting in front of him, studying generators. He asks what he's doing, and Yan Feng says he's reading an apocalyptic novel. The professor looks confused, so our guy says he's trying to figure out how survivors would solve the problem of generating electricity. Wang asks if that's what he's really asking, and our guy agrees. Strangely, the professor gets so close that Yan Feng gets startled and asks if he's taking this novel too seriously, or if he's managed to travel to an apocalyptic world. This professor is hacking. Yan Feng just adjusts his glasses, but inside he has no idea how this guy knows, since the beta was only for 4 people. Thankfully, Wang backs off and tells him not to take it too seriously, he was just joking. Yan Feng realizes that the guy isn't one of the players. But then Wang says that to know how to create a generator, he needs to understand a little more about the history. The little genius starts explaining that the story takes place 200 years after a nuclear war. The professor immediately says that it's going to be difficult since most of the electrical equipment will have been damaged by electromagnetic waves. Yifeng suggests taking generators from abandoned houses and restaurants, which are simpler and harder to damage. But the professor says that time has already ruined those. However, there's a solution. The boy is ready to take notes. Then the professor explains that every car is equipped with an alternator, and if you make some repairs, you can generate up to 12 watts of current, which is enough to light a lamp. But if he could add an inverter to the connection, he might generate up to 240 watts, which would be enough for a refrigerator. Yan Feng is taking notes frantically. The professor is thinking that the boy is taking this story too seriously. He then says that he has to teach a class and our guy thanks him, but he is immediately blocked by the girls who are eager to learn a lot from him. I don't know what all this love is, but they are begging him to be their tutor and help with homework. But at home while the hearts fly, Yanf knows that he will have to ask the administrator where there is a car. Messages start arriving on his cell phone. He decides to take a look. Apparently, Good Time has already posted a review about everything that happens in the game. In the boys' room were several gold trophies. Apparently, he is not fast for nothing. He says he's going to open a live stream to explain to people how the game works since he's not really in the mood to type. He explains that the NPCs are extremely realistic and even had some kind of friendship bar. Remembering that they think Guang is actually the person who called them to the game but isn't there. While Down is a kind of NPC, they don't know that the two are the same. He then explains that the sensations in the game were very realistic except for extreme sensations, for example, cheek falls caused a slight squeeze, but he gave his hand a smash with the stone and it didn't hurt that much. He explains that it is a difficult game, not for everyone, but he is satisfied with the experience. Apparently, Good Time is actually a speed run of the game, that's what he's fast at. I thought it was a kind of runner, but the boy is just a mega player. And the only request he has to make to the developers was to let the players choose the genre of the doll. Guang was watching the live stream and knows very well why this sly one is trying to reel in people with his live stream. Now our guy has 25 people wanting to participate in the game. This happens because Good Time was a professional FPS player and was also good at MOBA. The good part is that the boy has already created a group and even put our guy as administrator so he can send the game link at any time. Guang sends more messages, introducing himself as an administrator and saying that he is there to answer questions. Everyone is sending emojis grabbing his legs. The boy explains about the attribute system that represents the things they do in life, besides that it is impossible to change the appearance or gender of the character. And also shows that there is the issue of the expression on the 10. A girl tells him to disappear and calls him a poor loser, while at 100 she offers all the weapons you want to buy and there is even a secret event. As soon as he hears this, the sly one is all interested in this. Guang says he's going back to work and tells them to take a look at the site. He falls back in his chair thinking that so far everything is going well and the players seem to be interested, but at this time he remembers that Good Time said about people needing to use the headset. He then asks CV if he wasn't also connected to some kind of headset since he came to this world, but sometime later the AI says that he has already looked in all the records and there is nothing about him. Our guy says it's okay, at least he wanted to have an analysis of the body, he has now to know what the attributes are. The boy's own gene has the characteristic of Grandmaster. He is already at level C with some attributes between 8 and 6. Our guy is at about 5% gene development considering that everyone is at 0, he is well above. He begins to consider that perhaps he should also help the guys explore the world since with so many attributes it doesn't make sense to just stay there hiding. In addition, the reward of some quests arrives, including some secret ones, such as having the players connected for more than 8 hours. He decides to open the intermediate Arnauer box. The little robot is all excited saying that he is anxious to see what will arrive. What he receives is an injection of muscle cell strengthening, but the extra strength it gave was small and could be used once every 24 hours. It is peculiar, this neon red thing, imagine it is dangerous, but the AI tells him to relax since everything there is of the highest quality. Guang, who is full of padeo, decides to test it on himself since it would be very risky to kill the players. He injected it, felt his own arm and gave some punches. Nothing seemed to have changed that much. He looks at the thing saying that maybe it had expired or has some weird effect until suddenly his heart beats hard, and energy runs through his body. It seems to go towards his heart. At the time he gets excited, but the following second the power starts to disappear. He imagines that the thing was really expired for being 200 years ago. Giving some punches in the air, he feels that it didn't make that much difference, but at least it didn't make him sick. The AI then gives an analysis to help him understand what happened. At this moment he was with 1 more of strength of constitution that was an effect of the item. The AI then explains that 5 is the basic value of all attributes and he is already at 9 is basically twice as strong as a guy who has never trained in life. Considering this, Guang knows that 1 point means 20% of the strength of a common adult, which was not so bad. He asks what time it is and it was 4 in the morning. He knows that in half an hour the players will arrive, so it was time to prepare. The guys were logging in at 4:30 in the morning. They are really focused on the level. The AI goes out to prepare things and at this time a new mission arrives. 20 missions arrive together. They involved hunting mutants, collecting water and repairing the base. It seems that the mission to hunt mutants was daily and he decides to ignore it since the players are too weak for now. He would like to have a luxurious life in the base so he wouldn't have to do all this, but without electricity it is impossible. He decides to take a look at the new players who registered to see if there was someone who would serve for this. There were already 35 records and 10 of these he hadn't even looked at. His strategy of putting the girls on the screen worked, but at the same time he is seeing that the guys are entering there for the wrong reason. He already imagined that the only women that would appear would be uninterested players in survival, which means that they were not useful to him because they were of low quality. He decides to make the registration more difficult by forcing the person to give the number and address. This way only the most interested would at least go through all this. Obviously he only wants to accept extremely interested players. At this time a message arrives in the chat from someone and a girl takes a look. Apparently she is relieved not to be a client bothering her since today she is dying of a headache. She works in a design company and is part of the Dog's Body, which is the group there of Good Time. She is seeing in the chat the Good Time Unite only praising the game, saying that it was too good, mega realistic and immersive. She is starting to think that these two were bought by the company since it doesn't make sense for something so good to exist. She sees Guang once again in the chat saying that he would put these praises on the site. She sees the registration link and knows that Good Time is a great player. If he is praising it, at least it was worth trying. With this she clicks and soon opens the site with the 2 very healthy girls on the screen. A message appears telling the person to comment on the trends and things she likes to do to determine one of the 5 attributes she would develop. Strength made you carry more weight, and the things you threw caused much more damage. Agility was good for speed, escaping from creatures, and even dodging attacks. Constitution recovered the person's regeneration, made her immune to some poisons, and she could even eat peculiar things. The attribute of intelligence was not that simple. In fact, it also allowed the person to control neural devices more easily. Perception was intuition. It made the person know the risks and chances of being attacked before all this happened. Seeing all this, the girl says that the game doesn't seem anything special in the end. But something caught her attention. The message said that just like birth, you don't choose how you look. In the game, you don't customize cybernetic improvements, but for now, everyone would be basic. As she works with design, this plastic surgery of the future and cybernetic improvements caught her attention. With this, she decides to give this game a chance to see if she finds a new inspiration. She then clicks on the button to register and says that she was anxious to experience this futuristic design. Our guy then receives a new registration and is excited that lately several have been arriving. But looking at the clock, he sees that it was 6 in the morning. He knows that there is something more important to happen. The player's perception activates and Wei wakes up looking at the attributes. Shadow asks why he has traits of intelligence and is feeling like he is a fool, while Yu is complaining exactly the inverse of this, saying that he is too weak. Strangely, Wei already wakes up with his hand on his belly, wanting to know where the bathroom is. But the AI responds that unfortunately they don't have this in the base. He wants to curse the robot, but the friends hold him, saying that if he keeps cursing the NPC, it will affect the relationship they have. But his increased perception doesn't help. Okay, here's the translated text, adjusted for clarity and naturalness in US English. He feels like something bad is about to happen. Then the gang shows up, telling everyone to get in line and take their time. They obey, but one poor guy is really suffering. Our guy is motivated to maintain a dignified image for now. He then says that time is running out since winter is coming. They need to finish building the base as soon as possible. They need to acquire a ton of extremely important items, and the list is at the entrance to the sanatorium. Night, Hug, and Good Time are excited, while Yen Fong is wondering where the generator mission is. When Guang asks if anyone has any questions, Wei raises his hand, wanting to know where the bathroom is in this cursed base. Our guy realizes that even normal problems like this will be important at the base, so he tells the guy to follow him. Then the other 3 players start to feel something weird in their stomachs. Apparently, that mutant chicken from yesterday didn't sit so well. The guys end up fertilizing the forest floor while the smell spreads through the air. Sometime later, they're all finished. Back with our friend, Gitme comments that life is tough without a bathroom, while Knight almost cut himself using a leaf to clean up. Our guy is thinking that he should have told them to use moss to clean themselves, but then he thinks that moss probably wouldn't be better. It would probably make things worse. Suddenly, they all take a step towards our guy, who's a bit confused. Everyone raises their arms, saying that building a bathroom should be the priority for this base. Knight suggests making both a bathroom and something to collect what comes out of it. They mix sand and some pieces of wood together, creating an incredible fertilizer. Knight's 3 points of intelligence are finally being put to good use, it seems. Gang has heard that the people in Charlie City do something similar, since any kind of resource is extremely important in this world. Good Time then comments that they can make biogas, which generates methane, which can even power a generator. He explains how this type of device works and how they can create a self-sufficient station. Gang thinks it's a great idea since they can find a biotank somewhere in this world. He stays calm but praises the guys while thinking that these noobs are actually coming up with great ideas. Then Yen Fong says that the problem with both ideas is that to use that type of fuel, they would need tanks to store the gas. The protagonist says that's no problem since they have tons of plastic bottles in this world, since everyone's afraid of burning plastic. He then points to the side, saying that the list of missions they have to do and the points they'll receive is in that log. There's a mission to collect wood, to find containers to store water, and also recyclable items. He's also going to add an extra mission to find compartments to store the gases. The guys are starting to be impressed with the artificial intelligence since Wei and the NPC laugh, and Knight finds it peculiar that the NPC made a new mission based on the ideas they gave. Suddenly, Yanfeng raises his hand and says that when it comes to generating energy, he has a more efficient method. He asks where there are any cars nearby because most of them would work for this. Gang says that he knows where there's a parking lot, but he took a look and there wasn't anything good there. Even so, Feng says that he wants to take a look. Our guy says he accepts, but that place is full of dangerous ants, so he'll have to take one more person. Everyone is sure that Knight will be sent to make a good duo. Wei comes up to our guy and makes a serious face. At that moment, Hang points to Wei and says that he's the one who's going along because of his perception. Wei just accepts, while Knight thinks it's strange that he wasn't chosen. Our girl then tells them to come quickly, that they're going to collect some equipment and items to go. Sometime later, Feng has a map in his hands and has arrived at the parking lot, seeing a bunch of vines and the place all destroyed. He understands why the guy said that there wasn't anything to use there. Wei asks Feng why they're not leaving because there's definitely not going to be a generator there. But Feng says that now that they're there, they're not going back empty-handed. He keeps walking until he tries to lift the hood of a car, but there are too many vines. He tells Wei to help with the force, to which Wei responds that it's okay while he stops to think that he and Feng have been playing together for several years. But he has no idea what this guy does in real life. Sometime later, they count to 3 and manage to lift the hood. Wei asks if he's seeing the generator. Feng asks if he didn't say he knew how to drive, but apparently he doesn't know anything about cars. Wei explains that he knows how to drive in racing games, and he asks if Feng doesn't have a car since he's so smart. But he reveals that he's still in university. All he has is a bicycle. He keeps looking around the entire car and some time later is sweating, saying that he didn't find the battery but he found the generator. Wei says that a battery definitely wouldn't be in an apocalyptic scenario since it's a very rare item. Feng thinks that makes sense, but at the same time, he imagines that maybe the technology in this world before the war started already used some other type of energy, maybe some kind of remote energy transmission, which makes the chance of finding a quality generator very low. Then Wei yells, saying that he found something incredible. When he arrives, asking if it's the generator, the guy says that he found a very suspicious hole. Feng says that it's dangerous, but Wei is confident since his sense isn't beeping. Even so, his friend tells him to wait because the administrator didn't comment on it, so it might be dangerous. But with a bright smile, he insists, saying that it was his friend who said that they can't go back empty-handed. He already imagines that it must be like a game where there's a dungeon with some goblins to kill and some girls to save. His imagination runs wild as always, already imagining the reward, while Feng imagines that in an apocalyptic game, the chest will have a generator. They're both already glowing, saying that they're going to come back full of stuff from this dungeon. But obviously, before they left, Gang told them to avoid taking risks as much as possible and not to fight anyone. Then they start walking in the tunnel, and around them, there are some peculiar mushrooms. Wei doesn't seem to recognize them, and Feng comments that he's never seen one like that in real life either, so maybe it's something from this world. Wei picks one up and says that the patterns are very peculiar. Maybe it would be good to take them back for the others to take a look at. They already grabbed a bag of trash a while ago. Some time passed. They had already collected all the mushrooms and were thinking about going back. But Wei decided to run further into the tunnel, saying that he was feeling safe, and there might be even better things there. But suddenly, he stopped and trembled. His danger signal alerted him. He remembered that this was the same feeling as when the eagle attacked him. A roar came from the end of the cave, and he already knew it was something from a mutant. Then he ran out and told Feng to come quickly, that something was coming. A giant carnivorous plant then started to follow them. Meanwhile, Good Time and Night were exhausted from building the little bathrooms. Gang appears, praising them, saying that with this, each of them received 200 contribution points. He tells the guys to just separate urine from feces since they should be used for different things. But the 2 guys who worked all day had diarrhea, so obviously it was stinky as hell. Then he tells them to take a bath. The problem is that it was a natural river. There could be mutants, and if they caught a disease, they didn't have any medicine yet. The guys are getting into the rhythm of the construction, and right away, Good Time comes up with the idea of creating a bathhouse. The perverts are already imagining that when the girls arrive, they won't want to stay there if they don't have a way to take a bath. Knight agrees, saying that it would be even better if they could help each other and become closer and closer. Gang starts to realize that the type of publication he's using is only attracting this type of player. Right at that moment, the two fools were arriving, begging for help. Wei stops right in front of the hole they had dug, barely managing to, but Feng can't control himself and bumps into him. With this, the mushrooms go flying, and they both fall into what would be the bathroom. Knight appears, telling them to stay calm because it's full of leaves down there. Then Guang grabs one of the mushrooms and says that since they worked so hard, everyone should take a bath. Sometime later, they were heating up some water. Apparently, he prepared some food for the guys. Wei is impressed that they're eating with such enthusiasm. He then asks Feng where he found that, but Wei interrupts, saying that he was the one who found it. Then he also questions whether those mushrooms are really edible. Our guy says that it's a good thing they didn't test them. The name of these mushrooms was Blue Angel. That's because after an hour of eating them, you become an angel. But he remembers that Charlie warned that they serve to heal non-lethal damage caused by gamma rays. In other words, it was a perfect ingredient to produce a radiation neutralizer. But he warned the guys that they were lucky since these mushrooms grow in the same place where there are mutant leeches. A creature that's very small when young but can grow up to 3 meters in size and feed on an entire human. At that moment, the two realized that by entering the end of that tunnel, they were basically knocking on death's door. Feng then showed the location of the sewer to our guy, who with this gave him some contribution points. Wei thanked him. The mushrooms are worth much more than that, but he can't give too many points. Otherwise, the guys will start to think that taking risks is the right way to win. The problem is that he didn't imagine that there was a leech so close. This was risky for the other players who were also about to arrive. At least he'll be able to use these items to sell and get some more tokens. He then says that he's leaving to go get resources, and at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the server would open the door for them to return to the base. Some time passes. The fire is out, and Good Time comments on the inconsistency. He thinks it's strange that the mushrooms gave the same amount of points as cutting down some trees. Not only that, but they also encountered danger and a secret dungeon, so the reward shouldn't be low. Confused by the reason, he then says that he understands that it must be an idea of priorities. At this moment, the administrator's focus must be on them surviving, and that's why risky things are giving fewer points. This means that the missions aren't as important as the main objective of this place, which is to survive and improve base 404. Proof of this is that they went to look for a generator, didn't find it, and still received points. Everyone seems to understand what he said, and then Wei makes a joke, saying that they need to surprise the administrator with things that he doesn't expect to earn even better rewards. But Wei has a double personality, and he changes his mind. But this would only make sense if the game were 100% realistic in all points, which makes him think about something. The AI of the server is much lower than that of Dawn, which would only make sense if Dawn were controlled by a real person. At that moment, Knight gets a shock and asks if this means that the guy is lying to them. Good Time is with 200 IQ. Wei and Knight don't know very well what to do, but Good Time responds that for now it was just a suspicion. And besides, the guy hasn't done anything wrong against them. But with this said, he raises his hands and says that it was good for the 4 of them to work together to survive this closed beta. They were going to work together and share everything they had, even if Dawn was against it. Everyone is curious about the first steps, and he already tells Feng that for now, they have to start walking around and marking the places where there might be mutants. But they were to take Wei along, and as soon as he gave the danger signal, the two would run away. Wei, on the other hand, is wondering since when the guy became the leader. He's already even telling Knight to go back to cutting wood since they need to accumulate for the winter. Meanwhile, back in the apocalyptic city, there's a group walking around in chains, and one of them was a slave who, by the approved design, you already know that she's going to play an important part in the story. Obviously, the perverts of the apocalypse are already keeping an eye on her, saying that they can't waste something like that. While the guys enter with the items, Walter is just there watching. Charlie receives the so-called Mr. Lin, welcoming him. Bruce Lee is the name of the slave trader who says that what their leader had asked for was of quality. So it was good that their leader didn't end up with her in a few days. Gang was arriving right at that moment and seems to recognize this guy. Besides, the blonde is very similar to one of the legendary clones that was inside the guarded base. He knows that the mayor of the city is the only one who would be able to buy something like that in the apocalypse. But today he also has the mushrooms, so maybe he can take advantage of this. Bruce Lee goes walking through the city, throwing a bunch of tokens to everyone, telling them to get out of there. He followed the path and found our guy in the middle of it, who called out to Mr. Lin and said that he had something that he wanted. The guy turned around, asked who he was, and our guy raised his arms, saying that he didn't have bad intentions. For now, he's taking a risk since with a nanoprotection vest, he can withstand a few bullets before dying. Dawn laughs and asks if by chance he's a new survivor from Bruce Lee's street. Our guy introduces himself as Chu Guang, but Dawn cuts him off, saying that he doesn't care about his name. He warns that he doesn't do small trades and tells him to sell the trash that he has to Charlie. But Gang smiles, shows the bag with 2 kilograms of mushrooms, and asks if he really thinks that's trash. Bruce Lee smiles, wanting to know where he found them. Our guy comments about the sewer. The guy asks the price and he wants 200 tokens for the 2 kg. It seems that he asked for a price much higher than the normal selling price in the city. But right away the guy accepts. He realizes that apparently this is worth much more than he imagined, already imagining that this bastard. Okay. Here's the translated and slightly adjusted text for YouTube. Okay. Here's the translated and slightly adjusted text for YouTube. The mayor is buying everything cheap from him and selling it at a higher price to others to live the good life. Leo says it's best that old Charlie doesn't know about this exchange, and our guy agrees. The guy says he can give 200 tokens or an item with a 20% discount. Guang knows the discount is a lie, but the rates would be better than on Burt Street. So he asks if the guy has a gun. The guy says that's not a problem and hands over a non-automatic weapon. But as a bonus, he'll give 30 extra bullets. Our guy takes it to test it out and asks if the price already includes the 20% discount. The guy says yes, but if he wants, he can get a pistol for 100 tokens, but it only works against humans, not mutants. Guang knows that merchants in this world are shady, so he says he wants the gun, 60 bullets, and 25 tokens to buy food. The guy doesn't seem keen on negotiating, but our guy makes an offer, saying that where he found these mushrooms, there were more. Dao understands that the protagonist is asking for a kind of investment, and our guy confirms, saying he'd come back with 10 times that amount if he sold them at that price. Obviously, Dao is interested. If he took this to the main city, he could build a bunch of radiation neutralizers, making a lot of profit, knowing that this would yield more than 100 rifles in total. He immediately agrees and says they're friends now, shaking hands, saying he hopes they collaborate happily. Our guy agrees, saying it's an honor to work with him, but mentally he promises that in the future, he'll make this bastard pay for everything he's stealing today. The negotiation ends with Dao thinking that, as always, the best place to profit is in these unknown spots. Our guy puts the gun away, receives the tokens, and the guy says he's an exception. Our guy thanks him. The guy then says he'll give him a tip. Near those mushrooms, there are a lot of bloodsuckers and they usually travel in packs, so it's good to be careful. Kong knows this will be a problem since the guys only saw a single bloodsucker. He has no idea how many others are hidden there. Another scary part is their regeneration. Some, even when cut, end up multiplying. The easiest way to deal with them would be by burning them, but that way they'd also lose all the mushrooms. Lidio interrupts his thoughts, putting his hand on his shoulder and warning that he's coming for the last time this year at the end of the month. He's paying 2,000 tokens, and after winter starts, he won't be back. Guang replies that he's more interested in the products. With that, the guy tells someone to bring the tablet. As soon as Dao takes a look, our guy sees that he really has good stuff, from vests to night vision goggles. And as he scrolls, he sees something he really needs. A wood-powered generator that costs 10,000 tokens, plus an exoskeleton that makes the person stronger, more flexible and agile. With the choices made, the guy praises the exoskeleton but says the generator is crazy. It's better to buy some batteries. He has an exchange service that's pretty cheap. Besides, in this world, it's strange for someone to want a generator since there are few bases, so where is he planning to put it? Guang tells him not to worry, he won't use it on Burt Street. Dao then turns around and says he'll see him at the end of the month. Our boy asks about the 20% discount, and the guy says he already gave him a huge discount. He makes the love sign as the guy leaves, saying that one day, he'll get revenge on these damned vendors of this world. It was too late for him to go back to the base, so today he'd have to sleep in that makeshift house. Passing by the survivors, he hears several people selling things like soap and food. Several of them are trying to sell some useless things to Charlie, who replies that he's not very interested. Guang overhears someone saying that an announcement from the mayor would be made. A guy with a sign says that all residents of the city will have to deliver 90 kilograms of wood and 2 meters of leather. They had until the end of the month to do this. It was good to pass the message to everyone. People are already used to this happening, and that's why winter is always difficult. The problem is that trying to survive outside the city was even worse. Dao knows that all of this is for the mayor to accumulate resources and profit even more when the merchants come and no one is working. But this was irrelevant to him since he wouldn't be in the city when winter arrived. He continues walking until he sees Chu arguing with a guy, saying that it's the house she takes care of. The boy named W.D. says that she has to stop looking after the house of a man who's already dead. She gets angry and shouts, saying that he's not dead at all. D.Fu insists, saying that the guy disappeared several days ago. She could keep a piece of the door, he'd keep the mattress. That was enough. She tells him to get lost. In any case, he's tired of it. D.Fu decides to punch her, saying he'll take everything. Then our guy gives her time to ask if he's really going to hit her. As the guy goes for her, our guy grabs his arm, asking who said he was dead. Chu smiles and talks about that guy who wanted to hit her. He just tells the boy to go away, gives Chu a hug, and says that as long as he's there, no one will hurt her. He calls D.Fu by name and asks if he's going to stand there or if he wants some help getting kicked out. The boy trembles, sees him going to get the metal bar, and immediately runs away, saying that he'd better know that he's going to tell his father about everything. At that moment, he hands her a lollipop for defending his house. But just when she's opening it, some guys behind her appear, asking Chu what she's doing there. The survivors all had you in front of their name, so he's sure they must all be family. She immediately runs away, and our guy already imagines that she's forbidden from interacting with other people. Then a guy stops in front of him. He was Yu-Hu, the second son of the Yu-Hu family, who thought our guy was dead since he disappeared for several days. Our guy says that apparently the guy was wrong and he agrees. Yu-Hu comments that they've already collected part of the wood. The problem was going to be 6 meters of leather since they have 3 men in this house. He was thinking of going to the North Forest, where it seems there's a group of bandits. Guang thanks him for the tip but says he'll think of his own plan. The only problem is that these bandits in the northern region are very close to his base, and he hopes that the players and this people don't end up meeting. At that moment, the guy tells our guy that he only managed to get the boy from the Wang family because he was alone, but the Wang family had a lot of people, so he'd need a group. And at that moment, he has a perfect idea. He says that his sister will be of marriageable age next year, so he could be part of the family, and they'd be 4 men together. At that moment, Yu runs away, thanking him but saying that he's not afraid of the Wang family. The Yu-Hu collector is a bit confused there, not understanding why the boy refused such a good offer when joining a family with several productive people. The scene then changes to the next day in front of the sanatorium. People cut a lot of wood, and now they just had to process it. They'd have to set it on fire or do a specific painting and let it dry. The last way was to submerge it in water, but that would only be possible if they had pots and it rained. He explains that this is essential because even if they made a perfect barrier around the base, without processing, they wouldn't resist any little rain. Good Time then suggests they make cement and join it with this pile of concrete that's left over. Kite knows that even though they couldn't process this concrete, they could make some improvised structures using it and the cement. The problem is that for that, they'd need charcoal and an oven that reached a very high temperature. Right then, Wei appears saying that they made a huge discovery. There was a small lake in the eastern region that wasn't on the map, which means that it formed in recent years. They walked around the lake and made all possible annotations. He goes to his bag and shows the map of the locations where the danger signal beeped, meaning they had mutants. Kay asks if it's similar to the Bound, and Fong replies that it seemed to be a type of very thick mud that they found near the lake. We insisted on going to that place because he thought he'd fall into one of those stories where you find a girl in the middle of the forest bathing. First, that wasn't enough material to build the oven, so they'd have to get some more buckets. We is already suspecting that Shadow works in civil construction to be strong and know these things. He then turns to Good Time and says that the two of them will continue cutting trees. Everyone raises their hands, saying that they'd surprise the administrator and give their best. However, the following second, there's Wei and Fong running away from the bear, asking for help. The two friends run to help, but right then, Fong trips on the stone. He falls to the ground. Wei tells him to get up, but it was too late, and the two-headed bear is already coming to take a bite. Right at that moment, Guang wakes up in his room and grabs a gun. He imagines that all of this was just a nightmare, and for now he's still on Burt Street. While he thinks that it's the fault of these damned new players that the supplies he had accumulated disappeared. What he wanted to know now is how the players are, since he has no idea how they're dealing with Sven or how Sven is organizing them. At that moment, someone knocks on the door, asking if he's there and saying that it's Chu. She then opens it, takes a look, and asks how she can help. She offers a cake and says that it's for him. Our guy is a bit embarrassed and takes her hand, but at that moment, she's signaling for him to get closer. She then says that someone told her to deliver this cookie and says that she cooked it right away. He already understands that it's a plan by Yoo-hoo for him to like her and already asks himself what that guy has in his head. A bit embarrassed, he then questions why she revealed the secret. She says it's because she doesn't like to lie to others. Suddenly, a hooded guy asks if he's going to the hunt. Chu hides behind the protagonist and already says that that's Wang Defu's older brother. The little boy tells him that it's better not to die next to him, but his brother already pats him on the shoulder, telling him not to open his mouth to say nonsense. He then just walks past the protagonist. The clothes touch, they take a look at each other, but no one does anything. But Hang already realized that this one is difficult to deal with. He then says goodbye to Chu, saying that he's leaving. She hides behind the door and tells him to be careful. He pets her on the head, thanking her, while thinking that she's a good girl, but she's still too young. He'd have to wait a few good years. The people were then leaving the village, and old Charlie was watching this. Gong went to him to buy some food. Besides that, he bought a few grams of tobacco meat. They basically served as a natural preservative for the meat to last longer. Charlie then hands over the wheat he had ordered but asks if the boy hadn't bought enough a few days ago. Gang questions what the problem is, and Charlie says that none, it was really good to accumulate. But Hang notes that he's acting suspiciously. If the mayor of the city knows that he's buying so much, he'll probably think that he's forming a faction to rob this city. At that moment, he envies the other Apocalypse games where the characters have a lot of power and can jump and take everything. He throws the loot on his shoulder and says that, unfortunately, this one was too realistic. Charlie comments that he might need a cow to carry the resources. Gong just thanks him, saying that not for now, and Charlie then wishes him a good journey. Our boy wants to get out of there as fast as possible before the trouble appears. Back at the base, smoke is rising, and the guy says that the Lord has returned. Gang looks, wanting to know why they built a bunch of ovens if that wasn't even in the mission. Good Time smiles and goes in his direction, saying that he's finally back. Gang explains that it got late to come back and asks if they found any survivors or mutants. Good Time replies that no, and that they even built several earthen ovens to start producing cement. First, they'd burn the trees until they turned into ashes, then mix it with water to extract the potassium from the top. With the water removed, they'd have calcium hydroxide and also calcium carbonate. Then they'd mix everything inside the oven and finally get cement. Gong remembers that he tried something similar, but he didn't know all the techniques, so everything went wrong. While Good Time is dreaming, he already imagines the building that will be perfect. He then reveals that they're also extracting sore from the plastics to better control the leather and turn it into shoes. Gang tries to keep the cool, says that they did a very good job while he has no idea how he's going to present all of this. Goot says that it's an honor shared the will to rebuild this world, while thinking that this was the perfect move to gain a lot of affection points with this NPC. The people are already grabbing him by the neck, telling him to stop stealing the credit since everyone worked on it. Besides that, it was clear that Shadow already had 1% of his gene developed. Our boy praises, says that as a reward, he'll try to get an assistant for them. He realized that strength is essential, so maybe some players of that type would be perfect. However, we and the guys are wanting another type of player, right guys, one very young and beautiful. Guang just replies that he'll take that into consideration. Oscar is saluting, saying that serving him is the mission of life. With that, they run away, saying that they'd go back to work soon. Following that, Dan is back in the office and sees that he won new rewards. He won 7 points and decides to spend them on the basic boxes because he's needing more food. However, what he wins are 5 lollipops, a chocolate bar, and at least a little bit of salt. The problem is that it was only 400 G, that'll barely be enough to cook. On the other hand, he can. Swapping this salt for a low-quality one would mean a much larger quantity, but that's too risky. Salt of this quality should be rare, and having it would draw too much attention. For now, he needs to focus on rebuilding the base. He checks the group of people interested in the game, and messages keep pouring in. The problem is, no one seems that interesting until he sees a guy named Mosquito sending tables about things you can get just from wood. That catches Guang's attention, especially since the guy seems to know how to get the ketone, which is perfect. He clicks on the guy's profile, wanting to know who this is. In the gallery, there's a photo of the guy's workplace, and Guang concludes that he makes furniture using wood, which would be great considering that's what he's been accumulating. So, he sends the guy a message asking if he'd be interested in testing the game while measuring some wood. Mosquito gets a message in the group. As soon as he grabs his phone, he sees it's from Guang, but he has no idea who that is. He's shocked when Guang reveals he's the one offering the game tests. Mosquito wants proof that it's really him, but Guang just sends the link and tells him to access it. The guy is worried it'll cost money, but even if it's a scam, he's willing to risk it. A short time later, the guy has registered, and Guang just asks for the link he's going to send. He wants him online now. With this, he knows they'll have a carpenter. The question is, what's missing? He sees Musk bragging in the chat that he's in the game too, while Quit Smoking is angry because he registered a while ago. To calm everyone down, Guang responds that they need people with specific skills to test certain areas of the game. But Quit Smoking keeps sending crying emojis, begging for a chance, and Guang starts to wonder if maybe he does need more players. Now that he has a gun, hunting beasts for food isn't a problem, so he can feed more people. And that's when he realizes they have food, but no one to cook it. So it's time for someone with that skill. But when he talks about needing that in the chat, everyone's saying they know how. The problem for our guy is that it has to be someone skilled, not just someone who knows how to make instant noodles. Then a guy named Burger Pie sends a photo with a certificate, saying a renowned cook was present. Our guy chooses him. I swore it was going to be a girl. Not because of sexism, but because, they need a woman and a cook. A little while later, Sev comes running, saying he wants to see our guy. He asks what's wrong, because the little robot reveals he's at 1% battery. He relaxes for a moment, saying he thought it was something serious. But then he realizes he has no way to charge this guy. The little robot explains that he has wireless charging, but he has to be inside the warehouse to work. Now Guang understands how all those monitors are working. He picks up the little robot and tells him not to worry. He'll carry him. He goes up the stairs. Sev reveals that the base is powered by nuclear fusion. Our guy gets a shock, and the little guy says this type of power can be used for a long time. Now that Guang has discovered the source of everything, he already wants a way to steal it. But here comes Sev, the darned robot, with a twist, saying there's a little problem. The base was built so long ago that the energy could run out at any moment. Guang asks when that will happen, but unfortunately, Sev has no idea. He explains that, in theory, according to the plan, the base should have been started a century ago, not when he arrived. The good news is that you can find the part where the energy goes to the base and replace it. But Guang doesn't think that's so good, because he has no idea where to find that nuclear fusion energy. Shortly after, back at the base, he puts Stev on the ground and tells him to go recharge. The little robot says goodbye, and Guang is thinking that he must still have some energy time, since the base was delayed 100 years for opening. It should probably be working on a conservation method, which means he might still have a few decades. The problem that worries him most for now is really the cold. Not to mention that he doesn't have that much time to prepare. From outside he gets a shock. The guys have already built 8 furnaces, and they're all lit for some reason. Good Time is also invisibly there, while Shadow says he's finally appeared. Our guy praises him and the guy runs over, saying it's everyone's work together. In that, Guang says they don't need to be so modest. Everyone is really contributing very well. And as a reward for unlocking the cement, everyone got 1,000 contribution points. In addition, Shadow had been promoted to construction captain, earning another 1,000. He's given the freedom to design the outpost of the base. Shadow immediately thanks him, saying he'll do everything to rebuild their Earth, while it is wondering why only that darn guy gets extra rewards. Guang then says he wants an explanation about his plans. Shadow salutes, saying yes with that unclogged face. He then says that after leaving the game yesterday, he went to a place that produces cement in real life to study and discovered that the cement would be more durable if they added some steel powder. He explains the process of joining rust with charcoal to form the powder. Then you take the rest of the powder, mix it with cement and wood, and you'll have a super cement. Of course, it's obvious that it's impossible to make much cement with a few furnaces, so they would need to make a furnace made of cement to make more cement. Did you understand? Guang asks, so what are the next steps? Shadow says that first they need to make a cement furnace that reaches a very high temperature. And then they could replace the cement made of wood. The guy has never heard so much talk about cement. And Guang thanks him, saying he hopes it all follows the plan. In that, they're surprised when he says that some people would be joining the team. He was planning to throw a party to welcome them. A party that consists of good food. So who's up for hunting? The hungry one raises his hand, and he responds that he doesn't need that many people. Once again he calls Wei, since with his perception skill, he can easily locate a beast before the hunt. Our guy had Wei take him to the place where they found the mushrooms. Our guy took a look and said they were lucky not to go too deep. Then he told them to leave because the target wasn't there today. Wei then questioned why they were distancing themselves from the forest if they were going out to hunt. So Guang revealed that the forest in this world was a little different. And it was right ahead. Wei gets a shock, and shortly after they're in the suburbs. My God. I've tried to say these words about 5 times. I messed them all up. Suburbs of the city, kid, I finally got it. And Wei is terrified to see that the forest in this world is like this. And Guang says that from now on they have to be very careful. After the apocalypse, obviously the cities became a paradise for fungi and plants. And little by little, the animals were dominating the places. With the radioactivity of the war and the contaminated soil, most of them turned into mutants. However, Guang warns that the danger there wasn't just mutants. But instead of being scared, Wei is all excited, eager to find exciting things in this game. For the first time, he didn't have a fertile imagination, and Guang tells him to stay close. Suddenly, in front of them, he hears a strange sound. He stops for a second and then tells Wei that something is going to appear. His friend wants to know what, and Guang says there are probably some survivors nearby. First he's scared, and then he's interested, asking what the natives of this world are like. Once again, I'm surprised he didn't think about what the native women are like, so to speak. And Guang told him not to get so excited because it wasn't something to celebrate. In a place like this, strangers were much more dangerous than the plants and the mutants. A while later, near a car, Guang is sure there are some bandits around. The sulfur on the metal proved that bombs exploded there recently, and no one installs bombs near their house, which means it can only be bandits. He then asks if Wei, when leaving, heard any explosions to the east. And Wei responds that he didn't. He starts walking, then telling him to wait. But the kid wants to know what he's going to do. When Guang says he's going to investigate ahead, his friend wants to go with him. But Guang just turns around and tells him to stay there. Already afraid of being logged out of the game, Wei just responds that it's okay. He stays there hidden behind the little car, while our guy goes towards the building. At first, he called Wei to use him as a kind of trap, but considering that they're bandits and goblins, that would probably only make things difficult. But eventually they'll also be discovered, since his base is right next door and there's smoke coming out. If he doesn't deal with this soon, these risks will stay nearby. If for a second he thinks that the people around there represent a threat, he won't hesitate to attack. Some little rats are coming towards him, but he just says it's idiocy. The guy has already ended the rat's family, and there wasn't even an animation. He was walking outside when he noticed something right ahead. There were some cabins with lights on. He knows that in this apocalypse there are two types of bases, those that were built inside the ruins and those where people use everything around them. But only giant mutant humans build 100% wooden bases, using almost an entire tree. They eat any kind of thing from contaminated mushrooms to other people, rats and cockroaches. And obviously their favorite nutrient is the old species. He continues observing until, from afar as expected, he sees a green guy passing by with a bow on his back and human armor. That creature was a mutant sentinel. If he and Wei had continued straight ahead on the street, they would have been located by this guy and taken a barrage. The problem is that there are many obstacles in front. He can't see right how the base of these guys is, but considering the number of bases, there were at least 20 or 30. Compared to their base, that's something extremely dangerous. Hey, right at that time, a mission to end the mutant tribe appears on Street 76. Already imagining the size of the creatures, he knows that this is crazy. It's basically a death wish. But 200 points are 2 weapons. A discovery he made is that you can release missions by wandering around the world and interacting with certain things, which is strange, since the system window only opens near the base. So how did this mission come out of nowhere? He starts walking, but thinking that 200 points was still a lot of things. Wei starts following him, while our guy knows that bringing in several players will give at most 100 points. But this one was much more lucrative. In that, Wei asks what exactly he saw to be wanting to get out of there. Guang reveals that it was a mutant human camp. Wei was wanting to take a look, but our guy warns that he would probably be cooked and eaten. In addition, they only had one weapon, which means they basically have a single person who can face these guys. Now Wei got scared. He knew that the mutants were eating humans in this game. And Guang warns that for now it was good not to provoke these creatures. They need to prepare much more. The obvious problem is that the creatures were extremely close. A while later, returning to the base, he takes a look to the side and seems to see that the guys had made limestone. He gets excited about this because he knows if you mix it with cement, you can basically build a modern building. The rest of the group then appears and asks what animals those were. Guang says they were just 2 hyenas that they would feed on for several days. However, he wanted to comment on some bad news and some good news. Shadow simply wants to know what's good about it. Our guy says that in the northern region there was a lot of construction material stopped there. There was a lot of limestone that would be perfect for construction. Shadow animatedly says that this is very good because he thought it would be very difficult to get something like that. However, Good Time is wanting to know the bad news. And Guang then reveals about the mutant camp. With the green, Wei warns about the dangers, the strength of the creatures' size, and even that they feed on people. And Guang warns that considering the quantity and the fact that the mutants are level 10, if they discover the base, everyone dies. That's why no one can get close to Street 76 or leave through the East Gate. The guys just salute, saying they understood. Now Guang's problem is how he's going to prepare these 2 hyenas. He's already eaten their meat several times, but it was prepared by the people of the city, since all he did was buy it with tokens. All he knows is that he has to take the blood out of the creature, but he has no idea of the rest. In that, Fong raised his arm and asks if he can have some of the hyena's blood. Our guy wants to know why, and he says he has to verify some conjectures, basically some doubts. And our guy hands over a paw, telling him to have fun. He gets a shock, but thanks him, saying that this will serve. Meanwhile, the furnaces in the place are working at 1,000. A while later, Shadow warns our guy that the cement furnace was almost ready. Our guy congratulates him, says that when this stage is complete, everyone will earn contribution points. Shadow just thanks him, says he's going back to work, while Guang is starting to feel confident in passing missions to these guys. At first he thought he would have to keep lying, But it seemed that these guys were really interested in rebuilding this world. Maybe that made sense if you consider that several construction games also succeed. For our guy, this is the perfect situation, since in a place as valid as this, the text below is safe to be used for YouTube videos. He can't give rewards, all he can do is make empty promises and hand out these so-called contribution points that don't even exist, but one day they might appear. He even comes back to base wanting to check on how things are in the chat. As soon as Wei left the game, people were already talking about the new update with the mutant release. Some people don't believe it since it's not on the website yet, but I'm sure that now that there are mutants, probably more players will be recruited. Burger Pie and Mosquito are there sending emojis saying they'll be participating soon, while the guy trying to quit smoking is still crying. Guang decides to check the forum, and of course there's a post made by Good Time. The kid posted about the ovens they were making, the construction nearby, and the hard work of the guys. Several people were getting interested in the game, which was great for Guang. He then gets up, stretches, and opens the system to complete the missions and get some boxes. The amount of points he got from the system was pretty low, and he opens some common boxes. With that comes an incredible 5 lollipops. Once again, Guang doesn't understand if it's bad luck, or if this thing is garbage, until he notices something different. At least this time, a golden lollipop. That was actually a buff item called a chocolate-flavored lollipop that gave 10% more strength for 10 hours. The poor guy is ecstatic, saying it's the first time he's gotten anything like that in this damn box. But he wondered if it's possible for food to have a function similar to a drug. At least it lasted 10 hours. In a fight against a mutant that could change the chance of victory. It was an incredible lollipop. The only thing that wasn't incredible was having to suck on a lollipop before combat. He puts it in his pocket, since at least keeping something like an ace up his sleeve wasn't a bad thing. The next morning, everyone was back at work. Actually, everyone was exhausted again. However, Shadow raised his hammer because today they would work with limestone. With the limestone crumbled, they just mixed clay and steel powder and threw it all in the cement oven they made. The team uses his extra agility to spin the stick and throw as much air as possible until he stops and wonders how they'll know when the temperature is right, because Shadow says he has no idea. The Yuan's friend wants to know why they did all this, then he doesn't even know if it will work because the other one retorts saying that there's no way he can expect so much in the apocalypse. So it was just a matter of putting in as much force as possible and making it happen. The poor guy gets angry, thinking that since this jerk took over the leadership, he acts like he owns the place. But looking to the side, he wonders where Wei and Fong had gone. Guang was leaving the base and ran into the two of them, wondering what they were doing. One called him kind of tired, and our guy wants to know where they went, to which Fong reveals that they got close to the mutant camp. Obviously, Guang asks if he didn't tell anyone to get close to there. He apologizes, saying that he didn't do anything else besides setting some traps around. Besides that, they filled a bucket with a bunch of leech larvae. Guang is disgusted by this and asks where they got this stuff. Besides that, he knows that you can't eat this stuff because even though it's full of protein, it has a parasite that's very difficult to remove. Guang explains that they put some blood in the bottle, and as soon as the leeches entered, they couldn't get out. A few broke the bottle and escaped, but that's how they captured countless ones. Guang realizes that it really was a smart idea. Now he understood why yesterday Fong was asking for a piece of animal. But then he asks what they're planning to do with these creatures because it's obvious that they can't eat this stuff. That's when Guang says that his plan is to use them for fishing. This was something that not even our guy had thought of, and Fong explains that when they passed near the lake, they saw some birds catching freshwater fish. This is an idea that impresses our kid, since fishing is much less risky than hunting. The problem is that he himself is a terrible fisherman, and not even with professional gear would he be able to catch a freshwater fish. Besides, it's obvious that the fish in this world are mutants, so it's more difficult to deal with. But that's where these parasites might actually help. He asks if Fong knows how to fish, who replies that he doesn't, but he'll make some traps. Our kid congratulates him and says that he's looking forward to the results. With that, the guys go prepare everything while our kid now has to see a way to preserve the hyena meat. But at night he had prepared the meat exactly as in theory the guys from the street do. In theory, it was the process to kill all the parasites. However, Dalma smells it and it doesn't seem to be good. The meat was supposed to be reddish with a certain shine on top and a little seasoning stuck to it, but his was brown and had a smell of rotten meat. Maybe he had used the wrong method, or maybe he didn't even know what the right one was. Once again, he takes a sniff and wonders how it's possible that something cooked has such a bad smell. He throws it away with the certainty that there's no way to eat this stuff. It would be perfect if he had a generator, something he'll be able to get if he has more mushrooms to trade with Lidu. But they're still in the second week of September, and it'll still take a while for the guy to come back. All that he was thinking was irrelevant, since he needs to start accumulating food soon. Not to mention that given the condition of the base, a refrigerator was a distant luxury. During the next few days, they hunted during the day and cooked to eat in the afternoon, while our kid continued studying to learn how to prepare this stuff properly. Obviously, it was still a disaster. At least the group was working hard, and every day he received some points. Once again, he opened some boxes, and at least he received a bottle of shoyu sauce instead of a lollipop. The brand was suspicious, but he's sure that in this world it'll be much better than pure meat. Meanwhile, the guys are all around the pan. Says that they've been eating the same thing every day, which isn't good and is now making him want to vomit. In the beginning it was bearable since he was having fun in the game, but now he realized that this is very sad. Boca de Lira can even deal with this meat, that old wheat. What he can't deal with is the back. Good Time tries to eat, saying that they get used to this taste and their stomachs also get used to digesting it. But he needs to put everything out, saying that without taste it had a taste of old fat, taking the thing with disgust. Shadow says that they would have to find a way to remove this thick sauce first to see if at least it has a decent flavor. He tries to cheer the guys up, saying that this is a real apocalypse, but nobody is very excited about this. Even Good Time is wanting to kill this jerk who seems to defend the developer all the time. But something he considers true, salt is probably a luxury in this world. So soon when they have more money they'll have access. Wei, however, is saying that he just wanted to be a pit win so in the next update he can buy some good things. Fai then says that if he had better traps to catch fish they would be eating something different. But everyone is silent since nobody is a professional in making traps. And so asks how the cement process is going, and Shadow is all nosy, saying that soon they'll achieve success. The friend seems to doubt, however. He explains that he and Good Time not only will get cement but also are about to make some blocks. The only problem is that since they don't have molds his blocks are more like a sponge. Tells them to make some molds, however Good Time says that it's not that simple. To get a perfectly straight block they would need someone with skills. It's not like anyone knows something like that. He admits that the survival games he played didn't even compare to this. In those he built an incredible house in 30 minutes. Discouraged, he says that the truth is just that this game here is too hardcore. The two friends face, thinking that unfortunately it's true. Feng knows that in the last few days he's been making countless traps, however the fish in this world are all destroying them. Not to mention that because of the mutation of the creatures it seemed that there were no more dumb animals. He threw bait just to see the fish in some incomprehensible way take it out and leave quietly. The poor guy is exploding with rage, saying that the dozens of baits he had prepared had all been devoured. Unfortunately, the current option is with this hard meat. In that, Shad says that soon new players were arriving and Good Time some females to liven up the atmosphere. Wei says that he's using his perception to detect that if it was a woman she would be a very healthy one. But suddenly something catches everyone's attention. Some steps approach and they look back wondering if it was an attack from the mutants. But no guy, it was just Guang saying that it was time to make the introductions. These were the two new members of the place, our chubby kid Burger Pie and the craftsman and locksmith Mosquito. Obviously this was a shock of reality for the boys who want to know why there are two more males arriving. Guang wonders why everyone in this place has a stupid name but tells everyone to welcome them. The guys are clapping very excited, clearly for sure that's what they were waiting for. But then Burger Pie smells something and approaches the cauldron. Both he and Mosquito stay there standing for a second and suddenly get scared. The way the smell and the heat came out of that pan was extremely realistic. The sitar is there drooling without knowing the bomb that's there, while Chada asks what his attributes are. Mosquito says that he has agility skills and Burger Pie guess what right Phi constitution. They're gonna hit the chubby guy, he's gonna talk about the food, and at the time Wei offers saying that this is for them as a welcome ceremony, handing it to Mosquito asking if he wants to eat a little. Looking at that, Mosquito thinks that he was lucky that he's in the game because in real life that would clearly be a deadly poison. Without option he tastes, and at the time he's impressed that even the sense of taste was too realistic. Good Time explains that it was realistic to the point that if he doesn't eat he'll really get sick, which he thinks is a problem since for him it didn't have to be so realistic. Unless some girls arrive there, the reality could be amplified. In that, Burger Pie takes a little sniff and asks what's in that stew. Shadow explains that it's just a simple meat stew. Obviously the meat came from a two-headed hyena that they don't know if it's actually a dog or a wolf, however clearly it's not something normal. The chubby guy then tastes it and replies that the thing is mega slimy. Apparently they didn't take out the blood right. The isolated boys say that they tried their best but they're not that good. Viso Chideo warns chubby guy that the better he is in the kitchen the more he'll be valued by the administrator. At the time he's excited and decided to try to cook something. In that, the Mosquito says that he knows about carpentry. Shadow screams they're desperate when he hears those words, already goes on the guy's shoulder asking if it's true that he says yes, that he worked with that and with furniture his whole life. At the time he's dragged by the two saying that they're needing someone with very skilled hands to make some molds, however strangely, he was anxious to try the stew. But the two took him warning that it was better not to eat too much of that and to let the chef cook. With that, Burger just watched the poor guys being taken and already wondered if the guys in this game had some peculiar interests. He keeps an eye on the other car to see if they're normal, that is already saying that it's taking too long the time to reach the type of content that he likes the most. At the time Burger is sure that he didn't enter the game as normal not. Meanwhile the Mosquito took a look at the wood and already warned that they did a terrible processing and mushrooms will grow on them anytime. However, Shadow is more impressed that in 10 seconds the guy made a perfect mold without him having to explain anything. He asks if it's enough. At the time the guy hugs saying yes, he was really going to be of great help. It was time to go back to work and the cements are placed in the molds. With that, the guys are really erecting a real wall, or in this case they're making a real oven. The Goot, however, is not very confident, which makes Shadow angry, who tells him to be more positive at work. Everything they've been doing, they face the Ford, and the Goitme says that I'm sure that this won't work. With that, he walks away with the Shad saying that if it doesn't work they already blow a little more before leaving the game. Shortly after, the Mosquito had also made what seemed to be a perfect trap. He explains that he changed the whole fragile and round structure for a cage really made of steel bars, all this with material around there, and Wei celebrates saying that with this they were going to capture what he has been wanting the most. For a second I thought he was going to say a fish, right, but I forgot who we're talking about. It's obvious that in this case it's not that click capture, but the three leave towards the first hunt while Wong was there holding his meat until now on top of the fire until Burger Pie appeared asking what he was doing. Our kid was just waiting for this to happen since he knows very well the background of this there. He explains that he was wanting to prepare a smoked meat and Burger Pie arrived at the right time. He puts on the guy's shoulder and says that at this moment they're going through a very difficult situation. Not only did they need to save food for the people who were there, but also for more than 100 compatriots who would arrive before winter, and that's why he needs the chubby guy's help. Burger Pie is not a guy who cooks much, even though he's a chef. He's more like a guy who runs the kitchen, but obviously he has enough experience. The problem is that he didn't enter the game to keep working exactly as he already works in real life, and that's when he understands the trap he fell into when the... Okay, here's the English translation of the text, adjusted for clarity and flow for a YouTube video script. So, some folks were asking about skills in that forum, and he's wondering if that's why he got called in. Guang reveals he's figured something out. He's planning to smoke some meat and find better ways to preserve it. He knows our guy has some experience with food, right? He says, yeah, he was a chef in real life. But at the end of the day, this is a game and games don't always follow the rules. Our guy tells him not to worry. All they want is a professional opinion, so he wants him to give it a test. Burger Pie is still hesitant, but decides to take a look first, see how the guy is preparing it. He stares for a second and realizes it's easier to point out what isn't wrong. There's so much bad. He tells our guy that you can only smoke meat in an enclosed space. Plus, whatever's on top doesn't look like the right seasoning. Kong reveals it's tobacco leaves. In a world like this, where salt is super rare, it's the only way to add a different flavor and a little bit of smell. Plus, it has substances that preserve the meat well, so when it's on top, it stays on the meat and preserves it better. Burger Pie is totally confused. Nobody does this in real life. He knows some aromatics can be used for preservation, but he's sure too much would make the food lethal and inedible. He tells our guy that you can smoke meat without salt. This seasoning, even if the taste isn't as good, it's possible. He's not familiar with this more savage method, but he's pretty sure it's not healthy. Guang quits and didn't even know you could smoke without salt. Burger explains that microorganisms need moisture to survive inside the meat. Smoking is basically dehydrating the meat to the point where microorganisms can't survive. Obviously, it'll not only work, but it'll be tastier with salt. The boys are already imagining it, drooling and everything. He also explains it's easier to do with lean meat than fatty meat, obviously because of the moisture in the fat. But he warns that none of this matters if they can't isolate it from the air first. He figures it wouldn't make sense for them to spend so much money on tobacco leaves if they were really useless. He remembers Bert in the street, but decides to trust Burger this time. If he wants to bring in the players, he wants to see what they're capable of. He walks off, leaving the chubby guy confused why he was abandoned with the meat. But our guy is already gone, confident he's solved another problem. Now he's also considering bringing in some female players to increase productivity. But with just these guys he has now, obviously it's impossible to rebuild the entire base before winter. That's when he hears someone celebrating nearby. Good Time and Shadow come running up and tell him to take a look. They've managed to produce silicate cement. It has a somewhat human shape, I'd say, but they're both excited, saying this will change everything. Good Time says that since it was a test, the production wasn't that big, but they can definitely make at least a ton with the size of the furnace they have. Shadow even cries with emotion, saying it's not professional grade, but it'll still work. To reach the temperature needed for this stuff to form, the two of them had to keep turning the sticks for hours without stopping. Guang praises them, saying they're both doing an incredible job with this peculiar silicate cement. They've taken a big step in completing the first part of the plan. Guang gives them 1,000 contribution points, and the poor suckers are all happy, shouting with joy that hard work really pays off. But Guang is noting that these guys are earning too many points. This will create inflation with them all being rich in this base. But of course, there's an easy way to solve this, which is charging a lot for everything he offers. He imagines maybe he can make a gacha system where you can get a virtual wife with a 5% chance. That's when Good Time wakes up and says he has something to do with the cement guaranteed. They need more people to start construction. Guang wants to know how many, and Shadow says at least 10 right away, but the more the better. At a minimum, they need enough people to keep the cement furnace going all day long. Soon they'll need to build another one, which means they'll need at least 4 more people. Plus, some people to carry the cement back and forth and put it in the molds, so for more. And people focused on construction to build the base, so 8 more. Guang is realizing this guy wants more than a football team. The problem is, this base currently has enough food for 7 people to last a week. So if he brings in more, everyone will starve. On the other hand, winter is coming soon, and this base has to be built by then. So he sighs and says okay. He'll ask the superiors to bring more people out of hibernation. The friends are already imagining a group full of smart people and, of course, some girls. But Shadow is honest. He's happy more people are coming so he can give orders and make them work, already imagining bossing everyone around. He knows it'll be easy to build a wall. Hearing Guang ask for more people, he's now sure this person's identity is simpler than an NPC. An NPC that can even ask the developers to bring in more players is kind of suspicious. He's starting to notice this game reminds him of some fantasy stories, and at the very least, this is all running on some kind of futuristic supercomputer and it's not possible to have that much being generated by AI. He's sure there are some big shots behind all this, and the beta testers are going to be famous. Shadow is just looking to the side, not understanding what his friend is imagining. Meanwhile, Musk is wiping his forehead, saying he's finally finished a toilet made entirely of wood. At least it'll keep you from getting hurt using it, but the smell must soak into this thing. Burger Pie barely arrives and is already emotional, saying he doesn't even need to squat anymore. But then Fong comes running up, saying he'll be the first to break it in. The guy seems excited, saying the toilet was made for this. But strangely, Feng thinks this thing is public and everyone will be touching it. So he runs off, saying he prefers the same old vial. He goes into the bushes to take care of things, while Burger Pie finds it strange that this guy cares so much about something like that in a game. That's when he hears a commotion nearby, and when he turns around, there's a cloud of smoke. Ray apparently finally caught his first catfish. Burger Pie wants to know what's going on, but the boy comes running up, excited for everyone to take a look at what he caught. He throws the giant fish on the ground and cries with emotion, saying that after 3 days he finally did it. Feng is scared that in the end he brought it alone and said he was always on the skull because he ran ahead because of the money. He's a little embarrassed, saying he always likes to do it in the same place. Then Burger Pie asks if it really took 3 days to catch it, not to mention the thing is already more than dead. But Luren scolds him, saying he has no idea how hard it is to catch a beast like that. So 3 days was a short time. They stood in front of the traps with their legs already trembling. Both wanted to give up, but they knew it would eventually work out. Until at some point the rope started to move. They looked back and ran to the river to start pulling, but the fish already seemed to be escaping. Feng told him to bring it in soon before it came loose, but the signal beeped and he told him to be careful that he was feeling something strange. He then threw the Amingo aside just when the Mar Regia passed. They had to scare away a bunch of birds just to then be able to take the fish out of the water. The problem is that the beast was strong as hell and was still struggling. Obviously they had to finish before they could bring him. He tells Burger Pie to consider all this effort. He throws Man in the ombre and says he's curious to know if it can be eaten. Burger, on the other hand, has been cooking fish all his life, but it's the first time he's seen a catfish this size. The thing must weigh at least 50 kilograms. One asks if he's going to smoke it, but obviously the chubby guy refuses. A creature with so much fat and mucus on its leg would be impossible to dehydrate. Feng wants to know what they're going to do with it, so Burger P says he'll think of something. He knows that if he throws it on the grill, this thing will crush what they have. Sometime later, with a broth on the spoon, he says that this is the only thing he can cook with one of these things. A delicious mutant catfish soup. He hands it out to the people, saying that the only problem, however, is that he doesn't have any seasoning to remove the strong smell. But for the Wake who has been eating old meat every day, this seems like a marvel. Everyone is already taking a sip. They get a shock, look at each other for a second and cry with emotion, saying that it's the first time they've eaten something with a normal taste in this world. The poor Guang is desolate there. The boy has been cooking until today. He needs to be audited. Now he's being scolded. Sometime later it was 6 p.m. at the base and the staff had gone to sleep. It was time for him to take a look at the next players to bring to the site. Then he announces that they were entering the second version of the alpha and 24 slots would be opened. The gang already knew that the moment he sent this message the group would become a mess. The pair of smokers and another show Piedade already know all this. They are anxious, but the number 1 recycler responds that it's crazy because there are more than 100 people wanting to register. The KPR Guang is a very good thing since he can be very selective. As always, the biggest problem is selecting who really wants to play and not who is just going to occupy this vacancy. So he makes an announcement that they would have a winter event that would be extremely cold and realistic, but whoever stayed 4 hours of Dogata every day would receive a kind of super achievement. At that moment there were 113 people interested in joining, which for him is kind of strange since there aren't that many people in that group. He knows it's not a duplicate account because this game has a technology to prevent this from happening. It's no use trying to pretend to be another person since when they enter the game they will have the same face. He then decides to take a look at the game's outside forum. The pair of smokers is there as always with A.L. de Helena and some people talking. The girls are all interested, but the pair of smokers is always saying that this game is a lie so that no one registers and his chances increase. Now our gang is already wanting to kill this damn guy who is scaring the guys away. Sometime analyzing it, finally the Guang discovered where so many people came from. The game's website was shared in other player groups as very few people have access. Everyone is interested in being able to play for the exclusivity. The gang begins to realize that his strategy of having few players is serving to attract more interested people. The problem is that these forums are getting messy, and maybe it would be good to put some administrator. He sees that there were 99 at that moment and decides to take a look to see what was going on. As always, the guys wanting to be part of the game and the pair of smokers telling them to give up. Now the Guang is tired and already wants to kill this crazy guy until he sees that the good time sent a message in private already with the professional corridor. He's excited that apparently the Guang responded and asks what happened. The good time then says that he wants to know information about the NPC that is in the game. He thinks it's controlled by someone. He wants to know if Wang has any idea. Wang says that there is no problem answering, and the good time says then that he is curious, but then the boy says that the existence of that NPC was something very special. The player knows that he is discovering some of the game's secrets and asks him to be a little more specific, but the Guang Patrula only says that it is the first generation of perfect artificial intelligence that was developed by the company. The poor guy gets a scare. He had no idea that the IA was so advanced, but he is impressed and excited, saying that the future has arrived. The gang just lying to the guy, saying that the first artificial intelligence that was given personality, memory, and a way of thinking. In that the boy is thinking that he is a genius and always knew that. Now it is explained why the decisions were able to affect the progress, and it seemed that the NPC reacted so well that it is possible to believe, considering how immersive and realistic that game was. Really, now everything makes sense. Not even a person who is as detailed as him managed to find a bug in this game. The only flaw in the game really is that there is only one NPC, which makes him wonder if the intention is to test the game or to test the capacity of this NPC. The good time is all excited. He is sure that he discovered the secret, and that is why the winter expansion is coming. He sends all the messages to the Guang, eager to know his answer. But our boy has already realized that this one really doesn't hit the head well. The Troca is excited, realizing that our boy took a while to respond, that to give rope to the crazy, says yes, really he is right, and the expansion is to test artificial intelligence. The Troca is excited, and the Guang can't stand to talk to this guy anymore. He really saw what is the legendary state of disillusionment of a player leaving the room. He goes to some capsules. I've aimed for natural-sounding English while retaining the original meaning. I hope this helps. Okay, here's the translated text, adjusted for clarity and naturalness in US English. Okay, so there are these girls, and it's time for the new players to jump in. The next day, he told the guys that the temperature was dropping every day, and this winter would be the coldest ever. So they needed to prepare better than ever. Every minute and every second should be used wisely, because when the cold snap hits, everything will be harder. That's why he's updated all the listed missions, and everyone needs to work together to get through this. Winter's coming, and it's worse than Game of Thrones. With our guys' pep talk, everyone was pumped and back to work. The daily cold felt like an urgent signal. They hadn't stockpiled enough food yet, especially considering he wants to increase the group to 30 people. That's why they're constantly hunting. A key player in this is Wei, who has perception skills and easily finds hyenas. Burger Pie is the one who suffers, dealing with a ton of carcasses to smoke. Meanwhile, a leveled up to level 1, which now lets him find more enemies. He's thrilled, saying he leveled up even though he didn't really do anything. Now that I think about it, he looks a lot like Joey from Yu-Gi-Oh! Also, Guang has noticed that he's about to level up, but he has no idea how things work for his GM class. Sev showed that his development progress was at 52% and slowly increasing, as always. Shad and Good Time were motivated to make cement and improve its quality. It's hard work, not just production but also carrying it. But thanks to their effort, Shad leveled up to level 2, and Good Time to level 1. Something he also discovered is that just as you can level up by doing a lot, you can lose levels by doing nothing. The only unlucky one who hasn't leveled up at all is Fong. He's caught a lot of fish and is almost leveling up with 999,999, but he can't advance further because catching fish gives way less experience than killing them. Of course, Mosquito and our beloved Burger Pie don't stop working either. Mosquito has to help fix the traps. Plus, he's building a little house. Looks like he wants to turn it into some kind of chemical lab, and he's collecting a bunch of bottles. Guang isn't sure if it's safe, but he won't interfere too much, but hopes the guy doesn't blow himself up. While Mosquito is creative, Burger Pie is more of a do-everything type. He's constantly cooking and doesn't stop for a second. Obviously, his main task is to smoke the meat. Since they don't have seasoning, the only way is to remove the skin and put it in the ovens to dry. When winter comes, they'll put everything in a plastic bag and leave it soaking in the snow. The only problem is that the taste and smell aren't very appealing. Of course, the skin is also being processed and turned into leather. This way, they won't have pretty clothes, but at least they'll have warm clothes. They're using a mixture that Shadow made to soak the fabrics and then let them dry. The problem is that Burger Pie keeps telling our guy that the work is too much for him. Without a helper, it's impossible. He's giving Wei the side eye because he only sees the kid go out hunting with our guy, but the rest of the time, it seems like he's doing nothing. But Wei says he can't help since he's hunting PR. Plus, he obviously doesn't want to give that up since when he locates the beasts and Guang kills them, he still gains experience. Burger is angry seeing his smile, but Guang protects him, saying he unfortunately needs Wei because of his perception. However, he promises that more people will arrive soon and lighten the load. Even I'm starting to think these people are taking too long. Burger says he can produce leather, but he has no idea how to turn it into clothes. But Guang smiles, saying that's already taken care of. Looks like the first woman in this world is about to arrive. He puts his hand on Burger's shoulder and tells him not to worry, that he's looking for the perfect person. Of course, the problem is that as much as he'd like to find one for each function, that's impossible since it's just a bunch of students. Plus, he's giving preference to the people who seem most motivated. For our guy, this is like a plantation. As long as he sows the right players, he'll soon reap all the skills he needs. It was September 12th when someone says that the servers will finally open. He sits down with a helmet, saying that according to the instructions, he just needs to put it on and close his eyes. His nickname was Show Mercy, and the friend's name was Mindal. The next second, he opens his eyes, sees a blue light, and then wakes up in the capsule. He immediately starts walking, wondering if this is the game they've been talking about. Looking at his hand, he notices how realistic the cold he's feeling from getting out of the water is. He's also smelling a strange rotten smell, and when he looks to the side, there's a giant creature staring at him. He doesn't say anything, and the creature doesn't either. With that, he screams, wanting to know what the hell this is, and the big guy seems calm. Dude, that's the #1 recycler who came with the Mutant Lizardman class. Mindal recognizes it from the chat, saying that his character looks pretty ugly. The Lizardman says that he's the ugly one until he looks down and sees his own hand. He wonders why he has a claw and why he doesn't have the most important member. Mindal says that's the least of his problems considering he won't be able to do anything with that appearance. The recycler is angry, saying that if the game was going to change something about him, it should have turned him into a lizard woman. Mindal thinks these preferences are peculiar, and his friend tells him to shut up. He turns back to the capsule and remembers that the site said that the attributes they entered were similar to reality. However, he's obviously not a lizard man in real life. At least his attributes were higher overall except for intelligence, which was extremely low. Even he knows that 5 is the base attribute of a common human, except for the intelligence attribute, which is a disaster. The rest are much higher than a common person, so he's basically immortal. He easily does some addition in his head and is sure he's not dumb. With that, he's laughing, and Mindal is confused by all this happiness. However, the recycler just tells them to go meet the other players and the administrator. He leaves laughing happily until Mindal points out that there's something stuck to his butt. The lizard man grabs the paper and is confused since he just got out of the thing. Looks like it came stuck to him, but he has no idea what's written there. When he leaves the room, it's full of players. Everyone immediately looks at the lizard man who arrived and is impressed. They're all curious, wanting to see him, wanting to know how he got a secret class. Mindal puts his arm around his friend and tells him not to worry, that he's protecting him. However, Tom Elio pushes him on the head with his friend, saying that the lizard smell is too stinky. Looking around, he realizes that his friend really is the only one so far who has a different race. Just like he had heard, each player had a kind of base attribute. Then he notices, I thought I'd never see this on this base, guys. 2 girls arrived. The guy who just appeared in the game already has hearts jumping out of his eyes, staring at the big girl and her friend. The problem is that the two seem to be arguing, and he doesn't want to get involved in a woman's fight. The tall girl tells the pink-haired Magne that she must still be in adolescence to be so skinny. However, the pink one headbutts her on the chin, saying she's sure that in real life, she must be shorter. Then we see 10 minutes ago when she woke up and left the capsule. Her name is Wisteria, and she's a player with the intelligence attribute like everyone else. As soon as she came out and took a look, she was impressed with how realistic it was, and she was already imagining what it would be like to equip the cybernetic items they talked about on the site. She then ran to the door and was scared to see that the place was gigantic and already had numerous players. Something caught her attention. Another female player, very tall, who must be at least 5 feet 10 inches. Wisteria approached and introduced herself, saying it was good they met since they seemed to be the only 2 women in this place. The gigantic one with the perception skill introduced herself as Crow. Suddenly, Arya stopped, and she asked what was wrong. She looked around and then said that everyone there appeared with the same jacket. Her friend agreed and said it must be some kind of beginner's outfit. However, just by touching it, Wairia knew that the material used in it wasn't normal. It seemed to have a layer capable of insulating heat, cold, and even wind. It was much more advanced than any other type she had ever seen. She then saw a yellow cord on the side of the clothes and wondered what it was. When she pulled it, the thing compressed, tightening all over. The little outfit becomes vacuum-packed, and she feels a little embarrassed to see that nothing was left in the front. That's why Crow started laughing. "What's this girl?" She was laughing at her friend just because she was flat-chested. Of course, Arya noticed this, got angry, and said that the flatter you are, the dumber you are, woman. However, Crow just kept laughing, wanting to know if she was like that in real life too. She pulls the device, the clothes go into vacuum-packed mode, and she's already there wanting to humiliate the poor skinny girl. The two were insulting each other while Mendel was watching this from afar. Plus, the guys around were asking to take a drink in the face and test if the game was really 100% realistic. The poor guy was soon wondering if he had entered a game or an asylum until Guang appeared and told everyone to be quiet. The guys turned around excitedly, smiling. Finally, the legendary NPC had arrived. It may be Mindel's first time in the game, but he doesn't miss any of the posts that Good Time makes. Guang welcomes everyone to Area 404. He was the administrator there with the name down. For a second, everyone is seriously focused. Our boy is going to say something, but he's soon startled to see that there's a mutant behind everyone. As scary as it was, just from his idiotic expression, you could tell there was a player there. Of course, he has to be careful with outsiders disguising themselves as players because players have the commands to ban, so it's much easier to resolve. He decides that he'll deal with the lizard man later and tells everyone that he has good news to share. The war had come to an end. However, at the same time, it had left the entire world completely destroyed. Now, 200 years after the apocalypse, few survived, and times are tough. Those who were in the pod were extremely lucky to have the chance to rebuild this planet. He then introduces Sev and says that if anyone has any questions about this planet or this place, just ask him. Of course, Guang has been training this script a lot to always say exactly the same thing and not create inconsistencies for the player. He also shows the resident rulebook to everyone who will live there, and those who break the law can be punished with hibernation or even confinement. In the last case, a permanent expulsion would be applied. The people get scared, and Carr asks if this NPC doesn't have too much power. However, this is the only way for Guang to guarantee that everyone will obey him. The rules aren't anything too crazy, something around not fighting with other players and not destroying property. He was observing what people suggested in the forums and adopted it. The intention is just to ensure that players don't disrupt the experience of others. Obviously, if Shadow, for example, wanted to force people to work, he would be arrested. After explaining the important things, he left with the 24 players to present the surface. As soon as they got outside, everyone was impressed with the realism and size of things. Guang is now eager to show them the true reality of this game. After passing on some more rules and explaining how everything works, He handed the group over to Shadow, who was waiting eagerly. Some were placed to move the blocks, and others to repair the walls. Most of the men were obviously placed in construction. Even though they didn't know what the contribution points were for, they were all eager to earn them. Of course, some were learning how to use the fires, hunt, make traps, and everything else. Crow had the collection skill to improve her perception. Plus, she came with a type of toxin intuition that allowed her to know any type of poison present in the herbs. Obviously, that was just intuition. If she came into contact with it, she would still die normally. On the other hand, she also developed resistance that she could use faster than everyone else, so she was the perfect candidate for collecting things. Now it was time to know what to do with the lizard man. He remembers that this guy was the #1 recycler in the chat who greets him, saying that he can trust that it's him. The recycler then remembers that paper and hands it to our guy, saying that he received it as soon as he woke up. The thing stinks, and Guang notices that it's all wet. However, it seemed to be a special waterproof paper since it apparently came out inside the tube. To confirm, he asks where it was, and the lizard man says it was on his butt. Poor Guang wasn't expecting that. The lizard man tries to explain that it was stuck there, but he removed it as soon as he woke up. Our boy says it's okay. He'll try to read it. The message came from the person who created that base, apologizing and saying that this gene was actually a kind of accident. However, if it happened without him wanting to, you could call it natural evolution, and he wishes him good luck. Guang soon realizes that the guy is just making excuses. He decides to take a look at the recycler status to know what attributes he has. As soon as he opens it, he's shocked by what he sees. The creature that had barely been born already had almost the same strength as him, who's at level 5. Not to mention that most of the positive talents were focused on combat. Of course, he also came with some debuffs like gaining less experience, feeling colder, and being very dumb. But looking at the big guy, okay, here's the translated text, adjusted for clarity and natural English phrasing. Okay, I'm sure this will be good anyway. On the spot, tell the guy that from today on, he's coming along on the hunt. The beast lets out a big yell, saying he's excited to experience this. Our guy then tells him to wait for him at the exit of the sanitarium, that he's just going to take care of a few things and will be right there. The recycler is all happy now, saying he's waiting for the boss there. At that point, Largeo leaves all happy and skipping. Then, he notices something strange next to him and asks why her clothes are so tight. Obviously, it's Wisteria. He wants to know what happened. She explains that she didn't do anything, and that's exactly the outfit she came out of the capsule in. She points to the yellow thing and tells him to pull it. As soon as our guy does the same, the clothes stick to him. He's impressed. He's been in this world all this time and hadn't gotten this function yet. The transformation made the clothes lighter and more flexible. She then sees that Wisteria is standing there and remembers that she has to give her a mission. She had slightly higher intelligence than the other attributes and a talent that allowed her to memorize things more easily, as well as gain more experience from repetitive tasks. He remembers that she was a seamstress in real life and thinks that this talent is really perfect for her. He asks if she knows how to make clothes. She says that if she has the materials, she can, even though she worked mostly doing design on the computer, she also has a lot of experience producing goods. If that's the case, then they're going to look for the materials she needs. Sometime later, he puts her in front of the pile of leather and asks if it's enough. Wisteria approaches, seeming excited. She has no idea what animals it was taken from, but from the texture and quality, she was sure it was expensive stuff. She's eagerly asking if she can mess with all of it. He says yes. The leather had been processed by his boss, but unfortunately, he doesn't know how to make clothes. She pats her chest, saying that's a problem she can solve. She just wants to know what style he wants the goods in. The style doesn't matter, as long as it's clothing that warms easily. However, he warns that tools like a sewing machine would be impossible. At most, there would be some scissors and needles. Wisteria explains that if she's just making clothes to keep warm, that's enough. The guy is already excited. Here's another one who likes to work, it seems. He then says that she can start and hands over the materials, while remembering that soon he has to go out on the hunt. He was responsible for passing the mission on to the rest of the people and organizing everything. Our boy doesn't have much to give these people, so as always, it's contribution points. Even Wisteria would earn 50 points for each piece of clothing she made. When things started to evolve, he was thinking of creating a store for people to spend and buy items with their contribution points, thus maintaining a kind of player economy. He knows he'll need someone, though, someone who's an NPC to stay in that store. At that point, he remembers the slaves that are sold on the street. He knows that maybe that would be a good choice. Meanwhile, Largeo is wanting to know when they're going out to hunt. The guy says that there's no rush because first they need to find a weapon that's good for him. At this point, they've already built a little wooden house nearby, which was obviously 100% made by Mosquito. The poor guy is working double, since various things that would have to be made with other materials are being resolved with wood. The little bit of metal they had was used to make the blades, while most of the weapons were all wood. For example, the crossbow he was using had a minimum of metal and a hyena tendon to stretch it. Our guy has a rifle, but bullets are extremely rare, so obviously he's saving them as much as possible. The recycler wanted to get a crossbow, but the guy slaps him and says that he's going to fight with some spears that were modified to be perfect for throwing. He's sure that since the beast came with strength, he'll be able to kill from afar just by throwing them. While he's saying that, a monster that size would never hide behind a crossbow. He then picks up a spear and tells him to familiarize himself with it, since this was the item made because it allows him to fight both up close and from a distance. On the first day, they focused on improving his hunting skills so that in the future he would save our boy. The recycler is thinking that he's unlocking some kind of secret mission that only he has. Suddenly, the two of them get a scare, and when they look back, it was Mosquito bringing 2 potions. It seems that he was finally able to develop acetone. He quickly explains that with this acetone, they can basically make a type of gunpowder. Largeo and our boy are so scared, while Mosquito smiles. He says that everything goes right with this gunpowder until it comes into contact with fire. But then he notices that there was a Largeo in front of them. Our guy introduces him, a little embarrassed. He welcomes him, while he's dying of anger because this little guy came with a secret profession. At that point, the guy asks him to explain. He shows the whole process of distilling the wood, which removes the liquids, throws them in the thing, throws them there, it gets stuck there, he takes out the vinegar from the water, and it's ready. Now all that was left was to mix it with hydrogen peroxide, which would make a type of explosive. Largeo is afraid to ask what this guy does in real life, while the guy thinks that only in the game does someone have the audacity to do something like that. The guy just asks if, to summarize everything, he still can't make the explosive. Mosquito says yes, but in a few days he's sure he'll be able to. Besides that, they didn't need a high-quality explosive to have a destructive effect. For example, just by bathing a base with this acetone he made, it would be a fire that would take a long time to put out. The guy knows that this is basically the principle of the Molotov cocktail. He already knows that it will help a lot. He asks if the guy tested it. He says he's afraid because there are trees everywhere and it could start a mega fire. He says okay then, and we'll take it later to test it. With that, he gives him 100 contribution points, and the guy gets all excited. However, the guy tells him to start being careful and not blow up the whole base. Besides that, he asks Mosquito to talk to the rest of the base. This is because other people might appear who know some secrets of chemistry too. For example, acetone, which could be used to make gunpowder, could also be used as detergent. Our boy made a point of praising him so that everyone would know that Mosquito had done something incredible so that it would motivate more players. But in reality, while he was showing off, the guys were just angry, even more considering that the guy was even in the Hall of Fame of the site for having created acetic acid. Unfortunately, since our boy is poor, he can't give items. The only thing he can keep blackmailing them with is these achievements and the Hall of Fame. With all the players working and motivated, it was time for him to go out on the hunt. The industrial part is distant, dispersed throughout a region. Meanwhile, the northern part of the park is much more compact. Besides education, school, and housing, this area has almost no industrial part. Not to mention that it is one of the areas that has been most taken over by the forest. Besides that, he saw in the history of the world that this place specifically was not bombed at any time. However, the excess of refugees created internal competition for resources. Seeing that food was already a problem there, They closed the doors and locked up everyone who was outside. A lot of bullet holes and bones prove that the end there was not peaceful at all. The guy got a scare when he saw that there was even a little skeleton in the trash. He leaves, all twisted, saying that this game was really more realistic than he imagined. The guy tells him to get used to it, that it's a post-apocalyptic world. The guy seems to be taking a look to see if any resources are left, but the guy is discouraged because these places must have been robbed 10 times after the apocalypse. Until our guy says that he found exactly what he was looking for. In one of the clothing stores, there was a perfect sewing kit for the guy to know who. When he tells the guys that it was time to go on the hunt, that's when suddenly they hear some shots. Our boy hides on the wall, and the two of them come right behind him. On the ground, the bodies of some survivors and some people approach. The guy quickly recognizes that those were looters of the apocalypse. Oscar was standing there, and the guy was shaking. At that point, the guy asks what was happening, but right away our boy covers his mouth. Out of nowhere, the dogs of the guys in front turn around. Our boy realizes that that damned beast must have some kind of point in perception too. The dog gave a bark, the guys already opened fire. What is this, son? There's ammunition to spare. However, the guy noticed something strange. The guy's ammunition was falling on the ground before hitting the wall, which shows that they were probably using homemade weapons. The recycler didn't even have a chance to look and wants to know if it's human or mutant. The guy tells him not to worry, that he has perception. However, our boy told the two of them to shut up and look that there was ammunition at his feet. The guys were armed, they had and were much more experienced than everyone there. For now, they were for the two of them to return that soon our boy would arrive together. However, the guy don't want to return. They're saying that they're with more people. Besides that, they're just humans, so it's easy to win. The guy is excited, saying to count on him, that he can fight. They had crossbow, they had spear, they had Molotov, and besides that, a giant guy. Suddenly, the guy seems to be caught by this information. He's so used to running away that he didn't even consider that they might really have a chance to win. Since he always explores alone, he's used to seeing the danger and running away. However, now he has comrades by his side, and with the advantage of numbers, the size of the guy, they really have chances. Now excited, he says that this time they're going to solve this. He gives the instructions of where the guy is to throw the Molotov and says that when he hears the bullet, he's to light it and throw it. However, the guy is afraid since he'll have to cross in the open. He asks how he's going to do that. The guy says that it's obvious, he's to run. He didn't have to worry, that the guy's weapons had little range and wouldn't hurt so much. However, the boy doesn't seem very excited about this. But he knows that it's the perfect chance to impress the administrator. With that, he takes courage and runs in the middle of the open while they shoot. The looters say that if they surrender, they'll even spare his life. However, the guy had already managed to hide on the other side of the wall. At that point, the guys look at each other. They're sure that that boy doesn't have any weapons and just came to collect. So it will be easy to solve this. Right away, he releases the hyena, which runs in the direction of the guy. However, the moment she arrives to bite, she takes a shot and rolls away far. The guy, our boy, is carrying a hand cannon. Apparently, one of the looters says that he's going to tear the out of him alive. However, the friend tells him to be careful, that the guys are in more than one. However, before they could do anything, the Molotov arrives and explodes right at their feet. The two think of retreating, but it's too late. The guy is already nearby. The guy, our dear guy, doesn't hesitate. Before the bald guy could say anything, it's first blood. Meanwhile, in the construction area, the wall is being erected. Everyone is working hard. The furnace is at 1,000 and the production of doesn't stop. The guys appear, the guy comes to talk to him. Our boy, however, wants to know why the two of them are standing still while everyone works. He explains that he left the monster of Pydade taking care of the construction part, since he's a civil engineer. Meanwhile, he and the Shadow are planning the production of metal. Our boy wants to know how things are with Fong. They explain that the traps have improved. He's catching a lot of fish. Those that it's possible to dry are all being delivered by Burger. As always, he's smoking them. The only detail is that he's avoiding putting the traps too deep, because whenever he does that, the fish come too big. The guy says that it's all good. The important thing is that they're learning. and it's good to know that everyone was working. With that, he tells them to continue this research of metal production and leaves. He goes through the base, seeing that even the new players seemed motivated and that it was perfect. Probably these people in real life all work in the office. So being able to do something more manual and live like this was exciting. Really, the adventurers were all celebrating doing something extremely out of the ordinary. While who's an engineer for a long time and is already used to this place treats like a hero skills that in the real world are considered common here are treated like gold. And it's thanks to everyone's effort that the morale was starting to be rebuilt. The guy, he's really making the base. The will to overcome and achieve the objectives is at the top of human needs. Besides that, one of the advantages is that they can be as exhausted as possible here in this place and then go to the real world calmly. Now with 30 players and 152 registered, he knows that he won't have to worry about beginners for a while. It can be said that the people on the outside will be fighting forever for a helmet. Some time later, he tells the friends of the hunt that they were going to organize the loot of this hunt. What they stole from those looters was not little. Even the hyena of the guys they brought to become food. The guy takes a look, sees that there was some dried meat, a compass, and some strange cards. He's going to take a look at the card, trying to read what's written. And right away the guy appears and tells him to hand it over to him, that this is useful. Besides that, it wasn't good to eat the meat of these guys, since normally they don't care much about what they eat. You never know if this came from someone of your race. And right away the guy gets a scare and says that he won't eat it. Our friend then asks how he feels about killing a person. The guy says that he didn't feel anything. It was just like killing a game character. He even finds it strange that the guy asked this, since he played much more violent games. So he found it very. Okay, here's the translated text, adjusted for natural flow in US English. The moment the spear hit the ovum and the blood splashed on him, he felt a primal urge to eat. The gang was impressed that the others didn't seem at all affected by killing someone. Maybe the fact that everyone believed this was just a game actually worked, or perhaps the helmet was somehow managing their emotions differently, but he'd never know for sure. By 5 p.m., the wall was already repaired. Guang was starting to wonder if he was becoming useless around here. They were producing so much cement that it was starting to pile up. Obviously, once it hardened, it couldn't be molded anymore, but they could use the bags to build barricades anywhere. Plus, the car guys dug a huge hole, built a wooden frame, and poured cement into it, basically building a really solid structure. Behind that barrier, they're going to use the cement bags to build stairs so they can shoot from behind cover. This first line of walls will actually be the last, since they'll be expanding their defenses further and further outward. Also, one of the tips Mindal gave them was to start cutting down all the trees around the area. Since the place is basically an open forest, they'll be able to see anyone approaching. Shadow's complimenting him, asking what he does in real life. Guang replies that he works in engineering, but there's not much to do at the company, and he can't even be productive. Shadow says it's completely different in the game, considering everything they've accomplished in a single day. Later, it was fish soup as usual, but for the car guys who had never eaten it in the game before, it was delicious. Except for Wairia, who said the fish tasted too fishy. Burger Pie told her to suck it up because there weren't any condiments in the game. He was already doing his best. Of course, Ja came to his defense, saying he'd pinch her nose shut so she wouldn't smell it while she ate. Guang and Feng arrived, and the car guys excitedly called them over to eat. But they quickly noticed that the two didn't seem very happy and asked what was wrong. Feng said they'd heard someone died. The car guys were shocked since that had never happened before. Shadow thought it was strange. Until now, there hadn't been enough damage to get anyone close to death. Guang was thinking that he hadn't expected the first person to die would be someone outside of combat. Apparently, Crow, with all her health, was the first to die. He sent her to a cave of edible mushrooms, but she disappeared. According to the logs, she ended up in the lair of the mutant bloodsuckers and was probably killed. Unlike the larvae Feng uses for fishing, an evolved bloodsucker can completely dissolve a human in minutes. There's no point in trying to find her because there won't even be bones left. Then he tells everyone it was time to go to sleep to prepare for the next day. With that, Guang led everyone to the capsules and logged them out of the game. Lately, he'd been wanting to use the substance extractor, but the base didn't have enough power for it. The capsules can draw power, but they don't come with an outlet to make his life easier. He knows whoever planned all this made sure he couldn't steal power. He asks Save how the capsules that create the players work. Save explains that there's a kind of warehouse that contains the player's data, which is dumped into the tank when they're brought in. Guang asks if it's possible to switch one tank for another. The robot says maybe, but that would be like stealing. Guang explains that they can't use that yet since they don't have a generator. The most important thing was to revive whoever died, using the remaining substances. He had 70 idle capsules that would be perfect for that. Save says it's risky since he could end up using everything. Guang says they'll solve the immediate problems first and worry about the future later. He knows he'll have to create a penalty for death, so these guys are less curious. Maybe it would be better to create a level barrier where beginners can't leave to avoid dying. The problem is how to level up players like Crow who rely on perception and, in a way, need to venture out. Plus, she's a beginner with zero contribution, so there's nothing he can do. But if he doesn't punish them, the others will accumulate negative contribution. He decides the punishment will be putting them on the most boring tasks. He could also increase the respawn time. He thinks about how busy the day was. As the person who manages the inventory, he has to record everything they receive every day. The problem is, the more people there are, the more items come in and the more items go out. Today they managed to make 45 kilograms of meat but lost 10 kilograms just to what people ate. He realizes he can't keep track of these accounts and will have to call someone to do it. He explains that, at first, everyone will only be able to earn contribution by doing easy things so they don't take risks. This will only be different for people like Asteria who came with skills that allow them to do more productive things. After a day of work, it was time to collect points. This time, Guang managed to earn 17. Here he goes again, picking 17 bad boxes. Not possible. Oh no, this time he's going to pick an intermediate box and 7 basic ones. The box opens, smoke comes out, and he receives what appears to be 3 super lollipops, 2 small lollipops, 2 food items, and a medical item. The intermediate one was a nano-healing needle that could increase a person's healing capabilities. The only problem is that, as always, there are no instructions, and there's no way to know the side effects. He sees that, as always, the vast majority was a bunch of lollipops, but this time there's a Kit Kat and even some canned meat. He imagines the chocolate is still good to eat, but he's not sure about canned food after so long, considering when canned food was made in this world. It must be 400 years old, which is older than many relics. But it's okay since he can give it to a player to test. He sits down to take a look at the forum, and there's C apologizing, saying she didn't want to die like that and begging not to be banned. He finds it strange that she's afraid of being banned and decides to take a look at what happened. He sees that C has the toxin talent she received, which makes her surroundings glow green. She ended up wanting to try it out. He realizes that maybe she died from eating too much. She explained that she easily filled buckets and buckets of mushrooms that were edible, but while searching, she found a sewer. Upon entering, she saw several glowing things. Curious to know why so many things were growing there, she ventured into the depths of the cave, but before she could react, a creature had already swallowed her head. She didn't feel any pain, but she was shocked and woke up in reality, scared. When she tried to log in again, her login was restricted. Guang realizes that she screwed up and is still angry that she was banned. A lot of people in the chat are just insulting her, telling her to give her spot to someone else if she doesn't know how to play. Guang explained that it took 72 hours to return to the game after dying. But Crow, poor thing, wanted to come back anyway and asked for a price she could pay. Guang revealed that it was impossible regardless of the amount. She sent a crying cat emoji, asking if he couldn't make an exception, but he just said no because rules are rules. Plus, she lost 500 contribution points. She was in the negative, so she would have to do some forced labor, otherwise she wouldn't be able to leave the base. Guang is feeling like a jerk, using the poor girl as an example so that no one else does that. He's biting his tongue to avoid saying that he'll have to spend substance that would serve to bring back another player just to revive her. This guy is already tearing her apart, saying she doesn't realize that by dying, she's hindering the other 29. He knows he's being harsh, but he has to make sure everyone realizes the price of death. He decides once again to make it clear that this is a hardcore game for those who really want to experience reality. If a person wasn't willing to accept these conditions, they could return their helmet. But the girl is crying desperately, saying that if she takes off her helmet, she'll die in reality. Guang explains that she must be losing friendship points with NPCs, but apparently she's asking if they can release some of those items that help make friends, like some candy to give to them. Guang wants to throw the keyboard, seeing that she wants to solve everything with money. But the girl just keeps insisting, saying that with a game like this, he would earn a lot of money. Of course, for Guang, money is useless. But Crow is saying that he has to take this seriously. But she was shocked when he said that accepting money to improve the game for people would basically be enabling cheating. Tired of talking to this crazy person, he takes a look at the club. Good Time had gotten information from the girl too and made a comment explaining how death worked, what you felt. As always, there were people complaining about not having a key to enter the game. Good Time asked how the guy felt when he took off the helmet and stopped being a lizard. The recycler said he didn't feel anything different. The only thing he hadn't gotten used to was that when he's in the game, he has a craving to eat raw meat and bite everything. Good Time also asked about the encounter with the looters, including the part where he threw a spear at the NPCs. With that, it became clear to Guang that everyone considered the things they were killing to be NPCs, and that's why they didn't care. And from the information that Crow passed on about death, it could be concluded that pain was also diminished. Basically, instead of frying the brain, it gave the person a disconnect so they wouldn't be affected. Guang is envious of these beginners since he, on the other hand, had to get used to all this little by little. Good Time made a post with the chronological order of everything that had been happening and concluded that, at the pace things were going, the game would focus on competition and resource exploration against the nearby tribes. Guang thinks this is a good thing for the players to believe since they would basically do what he needs. So obviously he's going to copy this analysis. Sometime later, Guang fell asleep in the chair. As soon as he woke up, there was a message from the recycler wanting to log into the game now. Guang told him to go to his real job, but he said he was sure this game was going to be a success, so he was going to be one of the top players and get rich. Guang tried to argue that the game was still in beta, but the guy said that if the company has money to make a game like this, they're not worried, so he's also calm. Unfortunately, Guang couldn't argue against that logic. Compared to any other game available, this one was light years better. Not to mention, it was a game you could enjoy while you were sleeping, which basically gave you 8 extra hours. But he explained to the recycler that there was no point in him entering the game now since there was nothing to do at night. Obviously, Guang had already done something like that. The creatures at night are much stronger and much more numerous outside. But the lizard comes back with a strong argument, saying that he's a mutant, so maybe logging into the game also makes him stronger. Guang realizes that it was difficult to argue against this guy. But it was undeniable that everything he was saying made a little sense. The night really was the domain of the mutants. Maybe for him, a time like this would work more like camouflage instead of a danger. Unable to argue much more, he apparently releases the guy's login. At the same time, he wakes up from the capsule and Guang is even impressed that it was fast. He knows about the stinky business, but the guy says he has a mission, thinking of it as an NPC as always. He only accepts, saying that he just has to pass on the order. Guang then explains about the tribe of mutants that was in the eastern region. His mission was to find these bases and mark them on the map. If he found any kind of survivors or mutants, he was to return to the base immediately. As the person who manages the inventory, he has to record everything they receive every day. The problem is, the more people there are, the more items come in and the more items go out. Today they managed to make 45 kilograms of meat but lost 10 kilograms just to what people ate. He realizes he can't keep track of these accounts and will have to call someone to do it. He explains that, at first, everyone will only be able to earn contribution by doing easy things so they don't take risks. This will only be different for people like Asteria who came with skills that allow them to do more productive things. After a day of work, it was time to collect points. This time, Guang managed to earn 17. Here he goes again, picking 17 bad boxes. Not possible. Oh no, this time he's going to pick an intermediate box and 7 basic ones. The box opens, smoke comes out, and he receives what appears to be 3 super lollipops, 2 small lollipops, 2 food items, and a medical item. The intermediate one was a nano-healing needle that could increase a person's healing capabilities. The only problem is that, as always, there are no instructions, and there's no way to know the side effects. He sees that, as always, the vast majority was a bunch of lollipops, but this time there's a Kit Kat and even some canned meat. He imagines the chocolate is still good to eat, but he's not sure about canned food after so long, considering when canned food was made in this world. It must be 400 years old, which is older than many relics. But it's okay since he can give it to a player to test. He sits down to take a look at the forum, and there's C apologizing, saying she didn't want to die like that and begging not to be banned. He finds it strange that she's afraid of being banned and decides to take a look at what happened. He sees that C has the toxin talent she received, which makes her surroundings glow green. She ended up wanting to try it out. He realizes that maybe she died from eating too much. She explained that she easily filled buckets and buckets of mushrooms that were edible, but while searching, she found a sewer. Upon entering, she saw several glowing things. Curious to know why so many things were growing there, she ventured into the depths of the cave, but before she could react, a creature had already swallowed her head. She didn't feel any pain, but she was shocked and woke up in reality, scared. When she tried to log in again, her login was restricted. Guang realizes that she screwed up and is still angry that she was banned. A lot of people in the chat are just insulting her, telling her to give her spot to someone else if she doesn't know how to play. Guang explained that it took 72 hours to return to the game after dying. But Crow, poor thing, wanted to come back anyway and asked for a price she could pay. Guang revealed that it was impossible regardless of the amount. She sent a crying cat emoji, asking if he couldn't make an exception, but he just said no because rules are rules. Plus, she lost 500 contribution points. She was in the negative, so she would have to do some forced labor, otherwise she wouldn't be able to leave the base. Guang is feeling like a jerk, using the poor girl as an example so that no one else does that. He's biting his tongue to avoid saying that he'll have to spend substance that would serve to bring back another player just to revive her. This guy is already tearing her apart, saying she doesn't realize that by dying, she's hindering the other 29. He knows he's being harsh, but he has to make sure everyone realizes the price of death. He decides once again to make it clear that this is a hardcore game for those who really want to experience reality. If a person wasn't willing to accept these conditions, they could return their helmet. But the girl is crying desperately, saying that if she takes off her helmet, she'll die in reality. Guang explains that she must be losing friendship points with NPCs, but apparently she's asking if they can release some of those items that help make friends, like some candy to give to them. Guang wants to throw the keyboard, seeing that she wants to solve everything with money. But the girl just keeps insisting, saying that with a game like this, he would earn a lot of money. Of course, for Guang, money is useless. But Crow is saying that he has to take this seriously. But she was shocked when he said that accepting money to improve the game for people would basically be enabling cheating. Tired of talking to this crazy person, he takes a look at the club. Good Time had gotten information from the girl too and made a comment explaining how death worked, what you felt. As always, there were people complaining about not having a key to enter the game. Good Time asked how the guy felt when he took off the helmet and stopped being a lizard. The recycler said he didn't feel anything different. The only thing he hadn't gotten used to was that when he's in the game, he has a craving to eat raw meat and bite everything. Good Time also asked about the encounter with the looters, including the part where he threw a spear at the NPCs. With that, it became clear to Guang that everyone considered the things they were killing to be NPCs, and that's why they didn't care. And from the information that Crow passed on about death, it could be concluded that pain was also diminished. Basically, instead of frying the brain, it gave the person a disconnect so they wouldn't be affected. Guang is envious of these beginners since he, on the other hand, had to get used to all this little by little. Good Time made a post with the chronological order of everything that had been happening and concluded that, at the pace things were going, the game would focus on competition and resource exploration against the nearby tribes. Guang thinks this is a good thing for the players to believe since they would basically do what he needs. So obviously he's going to copy this analysis. Sometime later, Guang fell asleep in the chair. As soon as he woke up, there was a message from the recycler wanting to log into the game now. Guang told him to go to his real job, but he said he was sure this game was going to be a success, so he was going to be one of the top players and get rich. Guang tried to argue that the game was still in beta, but the guy said that if the company has money to make a game like this, they're not worried, so he's also calm. Unfortunately, Guang couldn't argue against that logic. Compared to any other game available, this one was light years better. Not to mention, it was a game you could enjoy while you were sleeping, which basically gave you 8 extra hours. But he explained to the recycler that there was no point in him entering the game now since there was nothing to do at night. Obviously, Guang had already done something like that. The creatures at night are much stronger and much more numerous outside. But the lizard comes back with a strong argument, saying that he's a mutant, so maybe logging into the game also makes him stronger. Guang realizes that it was difficult to argue against this guy. But it was undeniable that everything he was saying made a little sense. The night really was the domain of the mutants. Maybe for him, a time like this would work more like camouflage instead of a danger. Unable to argue much more, he apparently releases the guy's login. At the same time, he wakes up from the capsule and Guang is even impressed that it was fast. He knows about the stinky business, but the guy says he has a mission, thinking of it as an NPC as always. He only accepts, saying that he just has to pass on the order. Guang then explains about the tribe of mutants that was in the eastern region. His mission was to find these bases and mark them on the map. If he found any kind of survivors or mutants, he was to return to the base immediately. The recycler is excited about the mission, saying he can count on him. The next day, at 6 a.m., everyone woke up except Crow, whose body was still in the process of regeneration. The recycler, who had left in the early morning, had not yet returned, but he could see on the map that he was alive and not that far away. Shadow once again comes to ask what the plans for the day are. Shadow approaches and asks what they're going to do today. He dreams of the day when he'll ask this and Guang will give the mission to kill the nearby tribe. But Guang gives the usual mission of collecting materials, food, and improving the defense. They've already built a wall, but 3 more are needed to completely surround the base. The biggest danger continues to be the mutant tribe, Route 76, and they have 30 people and 3 weapons, which is not a good distribution. Not to mention that he's sure a common human doesn't stand a chance against those beasts. Besides, the fate of some players may be worse than death. He knows that the mental trauma will disconnect people from the helmet before things happen, but even so, he doesn't know what will become of the body a short time after outside. Wairia wanted to know where the recycler was. Guang says he sent him on a special mission, and everyone is envious. Guang says that Wairia and Good Time will go on a journey with him this time. He accepts everything happily. It's a pity, but he'll have to betray his friend that he had promised to help with the steal. Much more fun than that was going out to hunt monsters and gain experience with the boss. Not to mention that maybe it was time to open the mission to kill the monsters. He says goodbye to Shadow, and in the next scene they're already in the cabin getting their weapons. Okay, here's the translated text, adjusted for clarity and naturalness in US English. The device was handed to both of them, and they were told the safety mechanism was on the right side. They were going to visit a nearby location to trade some resources, but it was important that they both obeyed every command given to them while they were there. They represented Camp 404. Good Time said he understood, and Wei immediately chimed in that he did too. The guys wondered how long they would keep competing for his attention, but for him, as GM, it was perfect since it helped him control the players. She then said that they both seemed very excited, and the mission would also involve transporting some items. Quite a bit of meat and fish, leather, all in a cart. They should get ready now. The good thing is, since the guys think it's just a game, they think it's just another mission. Phil is already excited. A short time later, they were leaving the base. What the gang, the rest of the people, needed most recently were various tools. Saws, hammers, and screws. All of that was necessary to build anything. As much as the mosquito patch helps, it's impossible to advance without those tools. Furthermore, even though years and years have passed since the war, there's still a lot to be discovered, so you can always trade for something. That's why you find the best stuff at the survivors' camp, buying from people like Charlie who sell to the caravans. Our guy obviously hid his peculiar clothes, and everyone looked like an adventurer. With that, they headed towards the brown farms, obviously avoiding Route 76. The reason for choosing this place is that far fewer people know him there. Tun won't have to explain himself, just bring these two. The problem is that by not going via Route 76, the route is much longer, and the guys will get exhausted. Also, along the way they encountered some looters, so they had to take some breaks. But finally, at 9 a.m., they arrived at their destination, in front of the gate with several walls erected and a gallows in front. Unlike Route Bert, Senior Brown, who dominates this place, is truly in charge. There's almost no one free who lives there. Either they work for the king, or they're slaves to the place. But for our guy, it's fine since the whole town likes it when the merchants pass through, because they usually end up profiting. That's what he thought until someone pointed a gun at him. He immediately raised his hands, asking them to wait, but from the top of the wall, the guy told him to explain himself and say who they were. Guang explained that they weren't there to cause trouble, just to trade and sell some things. The red-haired guy, Lu Zengyi, thought it was strange and said he had never seen them before and asked where they were from. Our guy said that they have always lived in the wild and recently migrated to this region. The guy understands that they are nomads, and Guang says that's almost right. People who live that way aren't uncommon in this world. They usually travel from town to town while spending time in the wilderness. Since they don't work with planting, obviously everything they get to eat are hunted creatures. But at the same time, because they are always outside, they always have good things to sell. Obviously, there are nomads who kill, steal, and do bad things, and those are the so-called raiders. The red-haired guy immediately sees that the three of them are carrying weapons and feels a little safer. He then asks what things they came to sell and why they came there. Guang talks about the meat, the fish, and the leather, and that he is interested in tools and some wheat. As soon as the negotiation was done, they would leave. Even though he was suspicious, the red-haired guy realizes that they really seem to want to trade. He then tells them to wait there, that he will ask the rest of the people. Meanwhile, Wei is saying that the guy's base really has a very apocalyptic vibe. Good Time is impressed, saying that the update this time was really huge. The only problem is that they don't understand anything that guy was saying, since it's another weird language. Then the gate opens. Cart passes inside. It had everything that Guang asked for. The guy then comes up to him, shakes his hand, and introduces himself as Lu Zengyi, and he wanted to know what kind of meat he was carrying in that cart. Our guy says it was fish and it was smoked. He wanted to taste it if he wanted to. The guy then opens the bag, takes a piece, cuts it, and throws it to the slave next to him to eat. Without a choice, he says that the meat was without salt and really was smoked. 10 minutes pass, he wasn't feeling anything wrong, so it seemed like the items were not a problem. The negotiation begins with Zengyi wanting to pay very little. Guang interrupts, raises the price a lot, and says that he wants 3 times more tools. It was good not to try to trick him because he had negotiated several times in the open market, so he knows the price of things. Zengyi is silent. Guang wonders if he exaggerated the price, but the guy just accepts. With that, he is impressed that for the first time no one was trying to rip him off in this world. The truth hits him. This just means that the guy on Route Bert was robbing him more than he thought. The two guys realize that the negotiation is over, but our guy didn't seem happy. But for Guang, in the end, there's nothing to complain about. He got all the wheat he wanted and also several tools that will help a lot with the base's production. He shakes hands with Zengyi, who says that he is always welcome there to trade. Our boy forces a smile, saying that it really was very good to negotiate with him. Then, Zengyi offers some tobacco leaves, but Guang says that he has nothing to trade, so they are leaving. The truth is that he was wanting to buy some slaves, but there was nothing left. But the good Zengyi throws it in his hand and says that he doesn't need to worry, that it's a gift. Our guy then accepts, but obviously he doesn't use tobacco leaves, so he's going to trade them for some tokens. Sometime later, going away, Wei asks if that's the brown farm. Good Time is all excited, saying that it looks like they unlocked the trade update with neutral forces. He already imagines that the economic system of this world will be very realistic, like supply and demand. You can take something from one region and sell it to another where that is more expensive. Wei says that it's going to be cool to do that, but his friend says that for now the content must still be locked. But he is impressed with how many things he already has to do in this beta, even with this lazy guy helping them. Wei then tells him to remember that maybe the NPC is controlled by a person, so he will end up hearing that. Good Time remembers that and apologizes to Guang, saying that he will always die and kill for him. With that, they followed the way back to the base, but in the middle of the way there seemed to be blood falling next to them. Guang heard a weird noise, immediately hid, and when he looked to the side, there was a six-limbed mutant staring at them. It's a creeper with a shoe in its mouth, so it just ate someone, and the problem is that this thing shouldn't appear during the day. Guang tells them to prepare, gives the first shot but ends up missing. Then the monster gives a stare and lets out a roar. The two guys are startled, but then immediately excited, saying that they unlocked a new monster in the game. Guang tells them to stop having fun for a bit and focus on survival. With that, they shoot as well, but the monster manages to run to the building. The two boys tell our guy not to worry, that they will always protect his life. Guang then explains that unlike the Nayers, the creepers are a type of zombie that can think like a human. The good part is that they hate sunlight, which makes it easy to run away from them during the day. But this thing clearly has the sun hitting its body and following them calmly while dodging the bullets. Guang soon realizes that it got to his side too fast, tries to give another shot, and this time manages to hit the shoulder. With that, the monster is standing there all crooked, trembling, and Wei and his guy shoot a lot. But the thing seems intact. Then the creature advances and strangely completely ignores Good Time. It goes to Guang, who now realizes that he will have to resolve this. The thing came to bite Guang, who threw his weapon away, already pulled out the bar, and held the bite. He had more level than everyone and 9 points of strength, which was almost double that of a normal person, but even so, the difference between them and that thing was immeasurable. The poor guy was thrown away, hit his back on the shoulder, and it looks like he won't last long. Before he could react, the creature had already approached and was face to face with him. He tries to grab the metal bar again, and the monster comes to give the bite. The ground sinks, and once again he blocks it just barely. That's when he starts to feel a strange force coming from his chest. He wonders if this was the GM gene. He tries to push the thing, but even with the gene activated, it's not enough. He's going to get grabbed, but right at that moment, two shots come from behind, and a certain someone is yelling. Wei is saying that he is bad at aiming, but also, my friend, you have to open your eyes to at least shoot. At least the two of them got close enough to not miss the bullet. And in the meantime, Guang found the chance he needed, pulled out the metal bar and stuck it in the monster. With that, the damn creeper finally died. He thanked the two, but he was all trembling and not even able to stand. Good Time held him and asked if there was any place where they could rest around there. Wei says that this whole mess must have attracted more enemies. Guang says that the only option will be to make a stop. He follows a path in the middle of the city, but the three are surprised with heavy breathing and a missing foot. There was a red-haired girl, who, I'll be honest, seems to be Liang's sister. Don't you think? Red hair and glasses. They approached her, who obviously was going to pull out a weapon, but Guang said that it's better for her to stay still. Her tone was more serious, and seeing that she has no chance, she just closed her eyes. Then Good Time asked if she was an enemy, but our guy had no idea. But for him, that didn't matter either. He then tells the guys to pull up a chair, sits in front of her, and says that now they can talk. The girl just wants to know what he's wanting. Our guy introduces himself, says his name, and asks for hers, who answers Xia Ian. He asks for her identity. She says that she is a mercenary soldier from Stone City. He then questions where her allies are, and she answers that they all died. Guang doesn't seem impressed and just wants to know how many. She says that they left the city in 4 people, and 3 have already died. He then turns to Wei, tells him to look for the corpses, and bring the equipment. With that, the blonde goes while Chuan keeps wondering what language they are speaking and what they said. Our guy then asks about the creeper and why it was active. She explains that they were walking through the city looking for base 117, but the creeper was hiding around there and ended up throwing itself in front of them. They tried to run but ended up in the basement, and that's how her whole team was devoured. She then questions this shelter 117. Sean says that she doesn't know exactly, but it's in this region, and the item that their contractor asked for is inside that. Guang knows that there must be good stuff there, but for now it's not worth the risk, but it's good information. He can pretend that it's a dungeon, pass the information to the players, and let them deal with it in the future. She sees that he has no reaction and asks if he is not interested. He says that there is no reason for that. Then she reveals that there is a powerful mecha inside. Guang doesn't seem to believe it and tells her to show some photos to prove something like that. She had to have some way to prove this. Also, he wants to know if she dyes her hair or if it's natural. Out of nowhere, the guy asked that, and she says that it's natural. Guang starts hitting on the survivors of the world, saying that the color is beautiful, but she needed to take a shower. She gets kind of confused, asking if she is being provoked until someone tells them to let her go. When everyone looks to the side, a guy was with a gun aiming at Wei. Good Time and Guang pull out their weapons too, but the guy warns that as strong as our guy was, he wasn't going to be faster than a bullet. Our boy is happy when he's in danger, while Chan is happy that Shenyang hadn't died. He says that he wasn't going to leave so easily and will make sure that she gets out of there safely. Then Wei out of nowhere starts yelling and tells them to shoot already, since he was going to come back later anyway. Also, this guy was very smelly. He would rather die. Cheong obviously doesn't understand what he's saying. He's all confused. He gives him a hit with the gun, telling him to stay still, but Chan doesn't stop and tells our boy to shoot already, that anyway he was going to be back soon. Guang, however, knows that as much as he doesn't lose the player, he will have to spend the resurrection items. Then he tells the guy that he doesn't like threats, so if he lowered the weapon, he would still be spared. But Shenyang insists, warning that soon the blonde was going to die. But our guy just says that he will count to 3. They could shoot together. Achuan tells his friend that it's crazy and it was better to go and leave her there. Our boy starts the count at 3. The guy is scared, wondering if this lunatic doesn't care about shooting his friend. Also, that prisoner was strangely very excited to die. There was something wrong. Our boy already counted 2. Then Shenyang says that he can keep the woman, but there is something that he wants. If they handed over the key that is with her, he would leave now. Guang had no idea what this guy was talking about. The guy just says that it's a magnetic card, and she knows what he is talking about. Then Shan realizes that her friend was going to betray her anyway, and he says that it was better that he at least complete the work than both of them die there. The truth is that the moment that one of the guys died, he also pretended. Okay, here's the English translation of the text, adjusted for clarity and naturalness. The creeper was going to kill everyone, and then he'd take the card. He tells our guy to accept the offer because she was a woman, so he'd benefit. Our guy is silent. Sean doesn't say anything until suddenly he makes a sinister face, saying he agrees. The guy smiles and says that in that case, just tell her. Sean looks at the girl and tells her to hand it over quickly. Wake is realizing they seem to be negotiating instead of shooting. All he wanted was to die in our guy's arms and gain a lot of affection points. He starts yelling again, telling them to stop being stupid and just shoot. Good Time is telling him to be quiet because he's insecure about missing the shot, and Guang hasn't given any orders. Staring at the card, Shan remembers that the former leader of the group gave it to her. In theory, Shenyang shouldn't know about it unless he searched the leader's body. She grits her teeth and throws it at the guy's feet, telling him to pick it up. He reaches down with his foot and thanks her, but when the rug touches it, Wake just slides down and our guy fires the perfect shot. He falls to the ground, gone. Good Time is excited, freaking out about his first headshot until Gang says that he was the one who hit him, while Good Time's bullet was in the ceiling. Now I understand what he did. When the guy went to pick up the card, he disconnected Wake from the game, and his body fell. Sean is there, pale-faced, in disbelief that he killed the guy without hesitating. But Gang just said he hates being threatened and even gave him several chances. Wake was trembling, opens his eyes, and gets up, confused, wanting to know why he was disconnected. He looks back and sees that the guy was dead and wonders what he missed. Good Time tells him to call his provider and buy a more stable internet connection. Guang goes to the guy's body, takes the card and the gun. Then he tells Shan that he's leaving and from now on she's on her own. But apparently she wanted to be taken, and asks if they're really going to abandon her there. Gang is already leaving, asking when he ever said he would take her. The girl was confused. Being a woman, she was sure she would be kidnapped, which would be better for her than being abandoned without a leg. So she asks if they weren't a group of looters. Gang ignores the question and asks if she's disappointed. Not knowing what to say, she says she's just curious if they have a base nearby and if she could be taken there. One player is there, talking about if she is a type of NPC, and trying to understand why Guang didn't want to take her. Shan thinks she can be saved, but Good Time imagines it's risky because she's a mercenary. On the other hand, that was good because she had experience with various weapons and maybe could help with production. Hearing this, Gang figures it makes sense. He goes to Shan and tells her that she must already know that she'll only be a burden in her current situation. Being abandoned there would be a much worse fate than death, but if she had some skill, he might consider taking her with him. Of course, she would have to be willing to work. Shan knows that, to begin with, she wouldn't be able to walk back to the city alone. Besides, even if she got there, even the simplest prosthesis cost an exorbitant amount. Her options are to stay there waiting for death or go with these guys, which means she doesn't even have a choice. The next scene is in the cart being taken away. Looking at the sky, she imagines that today is the last day of her freedom on this earth. Probably all she's going to do now is have a lot of kids since she shouldn't have any other use. It's bizarre that she accepted that so calmly. She's just scared because she heard it hurts a lot when a baby is born until our guy interrupts all this reverie, saying they've arrived. When she looks, there are a lot of people working enthusiastically and several furnaces lit. She's confused by this many survivors in this place. She remembers having seen shelters like this in other parts that also opened a few years ago. There are several others around the world that have been locked for centuries. Something she's finding confusing is why they're building these walls when the base's entrance door is impenetrable. That thing even had gamma-ray lasers. So she asks if they all belong to that shelter. Before answering, our guy says he thought she'd already fainted, and a little embarrassed, she says she's not that weak. Guang noticed that she has a different constitution than normal. Anyone else would have fainted or had an intense fever, but she was calm and just seemed a little pale. He turns to the two and tells them to deliver the wheat they bought there to Burger Pie. Right away, they agree. Our guy remembers that he told Burger to build a house to store everything, which should already be complete. The whole food thing was easy to solve since that guy arrived. He goes to the cart, grabs a bag, picks up Shan, throws her over his shoulder, and takes the woman away. The two were impressed with the guy's strength. Chad appeared, curious, wanting to know everything that happened. Guang tells him to ask Good Time because he fainted right at the scene. Good Time was explaining everything, but unfortunately, he didn't understand anything about the negotiation. Besides, the girl who arrived was basically a new NPC. Chad says he understood but wanted to know why she didn't have a leg. Guang says he has no idea what they encountered. A monster from the new update called a creeper. As always, the guys are more excited than scared until Wake describes it as a horrifying creature of 2.5 meters with semen. Besides, they fired several shots, but the beast seemed to be able to move extremely fast and dodge everything. It was close, and fortunately, Gang managed to hit a metal bar into his back. Good Time then says that they not only completed the creeper quest but unlocked a new faction and the trading update. He says he's going to rest, but Chad warns that he needs help to finish the steel production furnace. Meanwhile, our guy was entering the base. The other players were all impressed with the new NPC who arrived. He wonders if the update with what they want most was finally arriving. Meanwhile, Shan doesn't even know how to react to being carried in such an embarrassing way. She couldn't understand what these guys were saying, but from the looks and the animation, she knew very well. At that moment, they were worse than hyenas, and she had become a delicious lamb. She starts to think that maybe it's better to take her own life and die with some dignity. But she was so weak that she couldn't even control her body properly. Then our guy enters the room, puts her in the chair, and she tells him to be more gentle, but he just ignores her, tells her to stay still, goes to the drawer and pulls out the medicine. She has no idea what he's doing, but he says that now she's going to have to endure it. Obviously, it's that pen from before that accelerates healing. He spent 10 points on it, but apparently it's going to be used there. Her wound was only getting worse, and if it continued at that rate, maybe she wouldn't survive. They don't have a surgeon to fix everything, so she's going to bleed to death. This makes him remember that he has to ask Mosquito to make alcohol so they can disinfect the wounds. He approaches her, who's dying of fear and asking him not to come near, but he doesn't hesitate and puts the medicine on her thigh. She's going to let out a scream, but soon realizes that it doesn't seem to hurt strangely. In fact, she wasn't feeling anything. So she asks what he did, and he responds that he saved her life and she doesn't need to thank him, which is a big lie because he does want her to thank him by working hard. But he soon notices that as soon as he injected her, she fell asleep. He figured that this thing makes the person so sleepy. Good thing he didn't use it in a fight. Obviously, he registers this to make sure he doesn't make that mistake. For now, he's going to let her rest in the place of the players who haven't arrived yet. The temperature and air quality are more stable, so she recovers more easily there. With that, her matter was resolved. He leaves the room, and that's when he remembers that after so much fighting, maybe he's improved his attributes. He opens the system and sees that after all this madness, he leveled up twice. Strength went from 9 to 10, Constitution from 7 to 8. Unlike players like Wake, who always gain points in perception, our guy gains them kind of randomly. At least with 10 strength, he's twice as powerful as someone common. Not to mention that the increase in Constitution begins to make him more immune to poisons. But then he sees that he has a special talent. In situations of extreme danger, his attributes increased by up to 15%, but he also fatigues faster. He likes the effect, just thinks this name of Wild Instinct is kind of cringe. Then he remembers the feeling of energy in his heart and imagines that's what saved him. Besides, looking at the creeper's information, he can't even see the stats. If it weren't for the talent, the guys shooting from behind, and him with that metal bar, it probably wouldn't have been possible to win. So he's going to take a look at the bag with the items they looted from the guys. This time, the guy brought the arsenal. There are 12 items in total. Finally, they had not only enough to protect themselves but also to attack. What our guy notes, however, is that most of the cartridges were very basic, made only of metal and nothing else. Besides, there were some bullets with a red tip. He's sure they must cause some special effect. Even though mercenaries weren't rich, they always had great firepower. Stone City really was a place not to be underestimated. But their base is now also starting to get good. After the winter, he's going to organize a caravan to pass by there and new negotiations will be created. Because it's not possible to depend on these damn merchants who are always pulling his leg. Some time later, a different dish had been made, salty yam with a little meat. Everyone was excited because they finally weren't going to eat that fish paste. Burger Pie is proud of the flavor since it tasted similar to fast food mashed potatoes. The only bad thing is that he had to use a little of the soy sauce that our guy delivered, and only for a small meal, saving a lot. A good portion was already gone. But my God, Wisteria with a horrible begging face appears, asking for a little more. But in the apocalypse, that doesn't exist. He says it's one dish per person. She makes a drama and a charm, wanting to know if she could at least eat it tomorrow. But he says no because soy sauce is rare. If she wanted to eat something like that when she woke up, she should order it on iFood. Burger Pie realizes that it's the first time in his life that he has to save even salt. He really was becoming a poor chef. Meanwhile, Wake was telling stories of the adventure and how he was a hero shooting, obviously. Good Time says that anyone who hears this thinks he hit some bullet. But the noobs are all excited, wanting to know more information. With that, he just retires. Night falls. Our guy was taking the S to recharge. The only strange thing so far is that the recycler hadn't returned for a long time, but he saw that he logged off 2 hours ago, so he was alive. He was probably sleeping in the woods, which is kind of dangerous since he has no idea if he can be eaten or what happens if that happens. But there's nothing he can do about it. He sits down at the PC and it was time to take a look at the achievements of the day. The construction of the east wall had been completed. Besides, with all the players working, they were accumulating material like crazy. Of course, they were also spending a lot of wood and cement on those constructions. Seeing the rate of wood spending, he knows he'll have to put another 5 to cut. The good part is that, after the negotiation, they have food like crazy, including wheat. The bad part is that they sold food like crazy to get the wheat. He sees that he also spent 5 pieces of leather. Apparently, Wisteria was finally learning to make clothes faster. Now, with this many weapons, he knows it's time to start thinking about building an arsenal. Even with all this, it was only 7 points. He decides to open when suddenly the CF comes screaming and calls for him. The robot seems angry, wanting to know why he brought a stranger back. Gang seems confused and asks what he's talking about, but the Sev says he saw very well him bringing the girl on his shoulder. Gang asks what the problem is, and the Sev reminds him that he doesn't have any command or way to control the natives. So even if they don't want to work or do something, there's no way he can stop them. But our guy says that the Sev is stupid if he thinks he trusts the players or the natives. Then the little robot feels relieved that at least he didn't say he doesn't trust him. But the Sev just turns around without caring much. It was time for one of his favorite activities, which was to take a look at everyone who registered. The count had reached 275, and now, instead of passing information, he also had to leave some questions. This is because now that there are many people signing up, he needs a way to filter them more easily. He doesn't want the girls who are wanting to enter the game to ask for gifts, but the tryhards who are crazy to give their lives in the game. At that moment, the game's website is already having more than 1,000 hits per day. The only problem is that until now it's nothing certified, so people are warned that it's a virus, but even so, it's undeniable that at the rate things are going, soon he'll be fine. While he puts the noobs to work, he takes a look at the forum and sees that the recycler posted that he was having a lot of fun. He even found a tire factory to the north. Okay, here's the translated text, adjusted for clarity and natural English flow. Our boy imagined that he not only didn't die, but logged out in the forest. Everyone is curious about the lizard's stories. And as always, Good Time made a post, telling everything about the creeper attack, the time they negotiated in the city, and our boy killing the creature from behind. Of course, he also talked about the beautiful new NPC that he's eager to get to know better. Our boy presses a button saying that the guy's post is high quality. Then S comes to talk to him, warning that the woman he brought had woken up. Poor Sean had been left on the cold floor. She finally starts to open her eyes and asks for water. However, she notices a guy in front of her. Our boy gives her a Kit Kat and water right away. Obviously, she grabs it and starts drinking, emptying the bottle. However, she doesn't really know what it is. For someone who was born in the apocalypse, you think she has any idea what a chocolate bar is? The problem is that M holds her stomach. It's rumbling like crazy. Without thinking, she opens the package and starts drooling, imagining that the guy wasn't going to save her just to kill her. So she tastes it and immediately falls in love, saying it's too delicious. While she was glowing, our boy opened the door and approached. The guy got right in her face and asked if it was good. She blushed and said yes. That's what Guang wanted to hear, and he asks if she'd like some more. Obviously, she's not stupid and says yes. He then explains that what she ate is called chocolate, and she can get more if she obeys everything he says. He would not only give her food and chocolate but also a safe place to live. He wants to know if she'll leave or stay. Obviously, after hesitating for a second, she says she agrees to work for him. Even so, she's sad because she knows this is the only option. If she tries to go back to the city she came from, she'll fall in the middle of the road and rot on the ground. Even if it was humiliating, she wanted to survive and wasn't willing to choose death. All she asks of Guang is that he be very gentle because it's her first time. Our boy even changed skin color, confused and not understanding. He then tells the lady to watch her thoughts because everything he's discussing is related to another type of work. She makes a strange cat face and turns all red, wondering if she's been misunderstanding this from the beginning. Wasn't he trying to have kids with her? The girl collapses and falls backward, her soul leaving her body from the shame she's feeling. A little later, he's explaining that the plan was to create a perfect camp for survivors and eliminate all the mutants that are around. However, she warns that restoring order isn't as easy as just creating a barrier. If he had gone to Rocktown, he would have seen that there are countless people much stronger than anyone there. Our boy just replies that he has a plan in the works while thinking that this girl is annoying and always rejecting what he says. Then he explains that even if he has to create countless generations of people, he will achieve this goal. Hearing this, she's sure it involves having children because he was talking about countless generations. So she changes the subject and asks if she knows how to do weapon maintenance, repairs, and things like that. She replies that she does because it's a basic skill in this world. Then Gang says that from now on, she's going to take care of the weapon shop. The fool still doesn't understand why she was brought to this place. He explains that she will stay in a camp taking care of the weapons and doing maintenance. Basically, that's it. She understands that she will have to sell, but she doesn't know who to sell to. He explains that it's obvious, to the residents of this place. Confused, she says that these guys seem to be his subordinates, so why is he selling weapons? Our boy says it's something like that, but the relationship between them is different. Many of them were just arriving, and in addition, he wanted to create a kind of self-sustaining economy in that place. Survivors could work to earn points, and these points would be exchanged for food, medical resources, and weapons. If she's from Rocktown, she must know the fixed system, and it was basically the same thing. Strangely, she doesn't seem to understand anything, and Guang is already tired of trying to explain things to her. That's when he remembers that intelligent people like old Charlie are rare since no one studies. Everyone is trying to survive in this world. Considering that she risks her life for money, she's clearly not the most intelligent. But for him, it doesn't matter. All he needs is one more person to obey his orders. He then tells her not to worry, that he would explain some basic words on how to communicate with the people there. She's still hesitant, but he says she has no choice and will have to do what he says. Besides, for the bastard, it's better that she doesn't even know how to communicate with the guys because then there's no bargaining. He'll teach her to say contribution points, the numbers, and the names of the weapons. That's it. He then hands her a sheet and says that it has the words and phrases she needs to memorize. The first one she reads is introducing her name and asking how she can help the person. She continues reading a lot of things, but makes that strange face again, not understanding anything. However, looking at Guang, she sees that he's serious. He stares back at her, asks if she has learned everything, and she obviously replies that she hasn't. The guy already scolds her, telling her to start memorizing soon because he's not there to do nothing. Then she starts to think that maybe the job of having kids would have been easier. Besides, she didn't understand why Guang had no interest in her. She remembers that the boss always gave flowers and flirted. This life of fighting in the streets was extremely risky. She risked her life every day. The big dream of someone from the Stone City was to marry someone very rich and survive easily. She always thought that one day she would receive the mission to protect a tycoon, save him, and everything would work out. However, looking at her leg and seeing that she's crippled, she knows that's no longer possible since no one will want to marry a girl without a leg. Kong wakes her from her thoughts, telling her to go back to studying soon. Seeing that it won't be so easy to teach her, he leaves, saying that he'll be back soon to test what she has learned. If she hasn't improved in conversation, maybe she'll become an agricultural slave in the Bertlands. At least he would earn some money. The gang is cruel. However, in reality, this is just a game of his to ensure she studies. Otherwise, she'll just be lazy. Obviously, he won't sell her as a slave if she doesn't learn. At most, he'll just kick her out of the base in the morning. The next morning, Good Time came to ask about her. Our boy said that the injuries were serious and she would rest for a few days. However, he had already talked to her, and now she's part of the base, and in a few days she would take care of the weapons. In the end, she was studying until 3 a.m., and he had to pick her up off the floor. Good Time, who loves to make posts, already knows the name of the new NPC and the function she will have. Then S appears, asking if today he would go on an incredible hunt. Guang starts to wonder since when he receives missions from these damn guys. Sometime later, he's handing a small weapon to the guy, saying that now they're going to walk around with this. Wei, however, is an anxious guy and is asking for a shotgun instead of the pistol. However, our boy just pushes it, saying that they're going hunting and not fighting mutants. It was good for him to familiarize himself with these two weapons before asking for anything else. Meanwhile, Shadow is still there with Good Time trying to make the metal furnace. Basically, they're trying to raise the temperature enough to start melting metal. After all these days of work, they finally manage to do it. The boys are crying with emotion, and Shadow knows that now weapons of the highest quality will be possible to make. However, Good Time thinks for a moment and says that maybe it would be better to make a pan to see if the food improves. This is because Burger Pie warned that the soy sauce is running out. So soon they will go back to the same thing, fish head soup every day. Shadow then agrees that maybe a pan would be the best thing. Meanwhile, Mosquito has been working for several days and finally completed a manual pressurized flamethrower. I don't know how he did it. This guy came as a carpenter but is building more than everyone else. The name would be Hellfire 0.1. Right at that moment, Fong appears. He thinks it's to talk about the traps. However, the boy says he found something much more interesting. He throws the bucket on the ground, and when Mosquito takes a look, it's something called struvite. I have no idea what it is, but apparently, they're excited, running in the forest to get more. Fong is saying that he also found a lot of phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium, some things like that. They run through the forest, approach the lake. Mosquito passes his and tastes it right away, almost vomiting, saying that the thing is really fresh. Congratulations to him, who just experienced bird poop. However, he knows that it's a chemical thing here and there with several NHs, and suddenly it becomes struvite. This struvite in contact with the soil and the passage of time makes a nitrate soil. You take this soil, do some chemical things there, and in the end you transform struvite into gunpowder. With this, they can make the most lethal of all, which is black powder. Fong says he understood. However, as far as he knows, they also need sulfuric acid to make this. Apparently, poor Mosquito is not such a good chemist. He forgot about this detail. But Fong says that they can take a look around and see if there's anything that helps with this. However, even after an hour of walking in the forest, they found nothing of sulfur. They walked for a while until they finally found a gypsum mine. Fong explains all the chemistry necessary to extract the calcium sulfate, which was what they needed. Apparently, they actually already knew this and had only forgotten. This is because to make the cement, Shadow had used sulfur. Fong says they're getting exhausted, forgetting things. However, everything was fine. Now it was just bringing it to the base. However, when returning to the base with the chests, there was a crowd around someone. They wonder what was happening, and there was a guy bringing a two-headed cow trying to talk to everyone. However, obviously, it was in a language that no one understood. Even so, the guys are excited, saying it's a new NPC. Fong, on the other hand, thinks it's better to warn our boy since he's the only one who talks to these guys. He asks Burger Pie how this happened, who explains that some boys were carrying the block, and when this guy saw them, he started following them until there. Meanwhile, the guys are more impressed that he has a two-headed cow. The players don't really know whether to stay with this guy to wait for the NPC or somehow try to force a quest from him. Meanwhile, the Wanderer has no idea what these boys are talking about. However, he knows that it's not good. He has a revolver. However, it only has 6 bullets. After he spends them, he will certainly be beaten to death. He tries to shout once more, saying that he's just a merchant wanting to negotiate. They don't need to be aggressive. He tries to say that all he wants to do is sell the things that are behind the cow. However, obviously, no one understands anything. He begins to realize that it was stupid to have followed these guys until someone asks what's going on there. The guy is surprised to finally understand someone's phrase. It was Guang with a deer on his arm. This makes the merchant scared because it already shows that the guy was much stronger than he expected. Then our boy throws the beast on the ground and tells everyone to go back to work. The people walk away. He arrives at the merchant and asks who he is. The guy just animatedly replies that he finally found someone with whom he can talk. But our boy stops the joke and tells him to answer. Then the guy introduces himself as T-Sheik, a neighbor who comes from the city of Red River. Guang, however, has no idea where this city is. He asks what the guy is doing there, who obviously says that he's looking for business. Our boy says he already imagined that. He wants to know why he followed the boys. He tries to explain that it was kind of a misunderstanding. As soon as he saw the people and realized that everyone was wearing the same clothes, he imagined that there should be a city around there where he could make exchanges. He's just a simple merchant who has no intention of offending anyone. The truth is that he tried to sell a bullet to someone for 5,000 tokens. This is because he has already heard about the people who wear this blue clothes and they say that they are idiots and easy to deceive. Apparently, there have already been several bases like our boys, but no one seems to survive. The merchant then explained that the guys kind of surrounded him, and he ended up following without being able to leave. Guang says he understood. However, he must already know that following someone to their base was not considered friendly in this world. The merchant once again apologizes and says that he's right in this. Our boy asks if he's willing to apologize, and the guy says that of course he is. Obviously, that was what he wanted to hear to start extorting the poor guy. As soon as he asks how the guy will pay for the apology, he becomes kind of twisted, and our boy says that obviously an apology cannot be empty-handed. As soon as he changes his expression, the guy says that of course he can choose something. Our boy thanks him. Sometime later, he's looking at everything that the cow has, impressed that the guy really carried a lot of good things. Some long-distance revolvers that were perfect since they were much more accurate. He notices something, opens a bag, and sees a lot of coins with the number 1. Taking a closer look, he sees that they were actually tokens from a game house. Guang wants to know the reason for this. The guy just says that he found it in any arcade and imagined that the metal would be useful. He questions if there were more, and the guy says that yes, he could fill about 4 or 5 bags of this. Then our boy says that he wants all these coins as, okay. Here's the translated and slightly adjusted text for a US English YouTube video. Sorry about that. Next time he comes, he's going to bring the rest, and they'll trade it for meat. Goo's thinking he'll start by asking for just a little from this guy to get him to come back and negotiate more. Also, he doesn't want the guy to know they're low on weapons, that'd be risky. Cheeky says if that's the deal, he'll definitely negotiate. It's not 100% profitable, but the most important thing is to get another base where he can sell his stuff. Then our guy starts offering certain amounts of food for weapons, and the guy accepts right away. In addition, after a while, he explains the situation in Red River City. They used to have several nuclear factories there, but when the war started, the explosions completely devastated the place. That's why the ecosystem there is extremely weak, and it's hard to grow or find food. On the other hand, the destruction was so massive that there's tons of junk, and you can find some unique stuff. It's almost like a whole century of humanity is buried under everything. Gang asks, but what do they eat, since they can't import everything? The guy explains that they're mostly eating rats and cockroaches. Hey, if it's got protein, it's going in their mouths. The insects are also used to make protein bars or nutritional paste. He says that the jar has one of the things they like to produce. Our boy asks if it's a type of jelly, and the guy reveals that it's mutant cockroaches. As soon as the guy says that, our guy doesn't want to know how it's produced. But the guy explains the whole process. They boil them, throw them in water, and then mash them up. That's how they extract the protein. He asks if Gang wants to try some, which he obviously refuses. The guy says it's common there because they have to deal with insects every day. Hearing that, our guy asks if they have any ways to deal with leeches. The guy seems surprised and says that in their city, there are very few of those creatures because of the ants. Our boy finds that strange, and the guy explains that they're basically giant mutant ants. They grow to the size of your palm, there are tons of them, they're resistant to poison, you can't hammer them, and they easily take care of leeches. Our guy seems interested and asks him to bring some next time. Later, the guy leaves, and he's back at the base saying he's having some good ideas. Looks like he's going to use those chips the guy's bringing as currency in that place. From what he said, there are about 70,000 of them there, and for our guy, it's easy to set up some kind of system. Also, he can spend the currency on the people who've been there from the beginning, getting them to buy titles and things like that. As soon as the economy stabilizes, he'll have everyone hunting and working together to earn more. That way, without doing much, he'll have everyone under control. Plus, the people who've been there from the start will want to work hard to maintain this system. In the end, having a currency was basic since every civilization needed it. Like this video, guys, we finished another little project, my dudes. There are still some chapters left, so maybe there'll be a continuation soon, right? Let's see if this one does well because, if it does well, the next part will be out soon. Sometimes I hate this story because it's so slow, other times I like it because it feels like it's developing everything little by little, from the very beginning. It reminds me a little of that island story where the guy was with the pink-haired girl from the start. It was slow at first too, but as soon as it got going, things took off.